I swore to protect and defend the Constitution and the Bill of Rights from all enemies, both foreign and domestic, and I will, if need be, lay down my life to protect it. The enemy can only go so far with the resources that are at hand, and it is realized now that we are throwing them off in their timetable. The tapes and the things that you see here are all information that we try to generate purely to educate people. Somebody has to stand up, so we have. Now, originally I worked as an intelligence analyst and as a counterintelligence coordinator from 1975 through to 1981. If I were to sit on the other side right now, I know that many of us would be gnashing our teeth. And the reason I say this is because what we've experienced is a situation where they aren't sure how many of us are out there. They know that the American people are in motion. Oh, many of them are butt cold asleep, make no mistake about that, and will remain asleep right up until the point where their body's in the front yard. Those are not your concern, nor are they my concern. Our biggest and most important issue is to consolidate virtually all of the particular groups that are across the country, not to come together to some paramount central meeting, but to come together in mind and understand that we have a common enemy that is threatening the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. That is why we are identifying the threat that we're talking about here. Do they have the resource capability to do this? Yes. As we discussed earlier, with the dispersion of U.S. military forces across the globe, we do not have the capacity inside the United States, were it not for American militia, you know, the armed citizen, to repel any existing military force that might attempt activities here, including our own forces used against the American citizenry. Now again, if they are under United Nations Charter, and if they are under United Nations authority, they are not American forces. That's a mistake that's made from the beginning.
Announcement. Mark does a radio program. I co-hosted with him on shortwave Monday through Friday. I don't know, how many people out there have heard of the intelligence report? Okay, we got a few. We've got the same time slot, Monday through Friday, 8 to 9 p.m. on 5.065. And that goes Monday through Friday. It's sponsored by Viking International. And the program itself is really gaining a lot of speed. They stuck us in Jack McLamb's old time slot, and we got a lot of Jack's old listeners, plus the people that followed us over from 12.160. So if you don't have a shortwave now, I would suggest that you get one, because it's going to come a time real soon that's going to be the only way we're going to be able to communicate or get any type of news.
When they stood before the recruiter originally, I don't care who you are, when they raised their hand up and they swore to protect and defend the Constitution and the Bill of Rights from all enemies, both foreign and domestic, there's a lump right here. I don't care who you are. The problem is they're trying to take that, and they have been taking it out of the oath. They're reconfiguring it. You're swearing allegiance to an officer now, or to a central individual or figure. That's what they did in Nazi Germany, and that's what they do in communist Russia, and that's what they also do in China. By swearing to protect and defend the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, a conscience is born even in the soldier, because you know the difference between a rightful order and a wrong order. I've had officers and enlisted men, senior NCOs. In fact, every once in a while you're going to have this happen at a Patriot meeting. There are men who will show up, and they could care less if anybody sees them. They'll show up in uniform. I had an old gunny in Michigan show up. He goes, I don't care what you say. I don't care who's here. I'm in charge of 180 Patriots. We're all in uniform. We swore to protect and defend the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And when the time comes, we will. That's the kind of men that are still out there. But I'll tell you something. They've seen all this. Everything we've talked about, everything we're discussing, they've experienced. They see it from their own perspective, and they consider it bad. No, none of them have, for a long time, believed that the American people would wake up. You know how many soldiers have come to us and said, Mark, I can't believe that the American people can figure out what's going on. People are actually talking about this now. By accident, when we were on a plane, a gentleman coming back from, a senior sergeant coming back from Saudi Arabia, was sitting on the plane with us, started a conversation with John, and he said the same thing. He said, yeah, we saw all this overseas. I know what you're talking about. In fact, we can see it from outside the country looking in. He says, but I can't believe I'm sitting in a plane with an American who actually understands. I thought we were alone. That's happening all over the place. People are waking up on both sides. I spoke with a Marine Corps general approximately 4 months ago. We've spoken with several general staff officers. One of the comments he made was this. He said, Mark, we can fight the New World Order, we could beat the New World Order, and we can ensure that this government is preserved. He said, but there's one problem. Will the American people stand up with us when the time comes? There are a lot of good men and women out there that are in uniform, but their concern is, it's easy to say, I'll fight to the last drop of your blood. They would like to see people standing shoulder to shoulder. And they don't want to be in front of, nor do they want to be behind with bayonets. They're good men and women. They understand what this form of government is about.
What kind of damage have we done? I'm sorry.
Okay, mostly it's been the fact that we have gotten to the rank and file. That has been the best thing that can happen.
Okay.
The rank and file are the ones who pull the trigger. By getting to those people first and explaining to them, hey, you're going to shoot at mom and dad? You're going to shoot at your brother and sister? You got people here you live next to every day. You go down to the gas station and buy gas from a guy who's got a big NRA sticker in the back of his pickup truck. You wave and smile at him every day. You're going to gun him down when he says, I'm not going to let you take my weapons? And all of a sudden, you got to force them to think. You better make it personal. You got to make it very personal. You're going to shoot people when they say they're not going to take, you're not going to let you take their weapons? Are you going to kill some of us? Because you better make up your mind. It's not going to be a maybe. It has to become a yes or a no decision, because that's really all this is. This is now, we're past the, there's no fence sitting. We want a clear line between enemy and friend.
Well, will they be pulled out of this country?
Well, the military will, they'll try to. In fact, you can see how they've orchestrated several actions, and they're desperate. They're desperate to try and pull as many of our soldiers out as they can.
Our military, but they're also have a neat little plan. It's called Partnership or Bridge to America, a partnership program. Now, this program is amazing. As you can see from this document here, this shows what they're going to do in reality is take members of the local reserve, the reserve units, the National Guard. They will fly them, ship them to Russia. They will fly Russian military into your local National Guard locations. Just like it kind of gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling inside, as now we have the Soviet military taking over our own National Guard locations, and our own National Guardsmen are out of here, and they're in Russia. You can see from this document right here, it's just another one of their ridiculous steps forward in their one world army.
And then, acting on another precedent established during the operation in Somalia, Mr. Clinton directed the United States forces to replace Haiti's leader and to disarm the civilian population. Now, in an age when precedents are swiftly relied upon to justify additional action, the United Nations' newly adopted role of choosing national leaders and disarming civilians constitutes a threat to the independence of any nation, certainly including ours. Might we ever get to a point where United Nations troops are sent to America while our own military are stationed in Germany and in the Middle East and in Japan and in Korea and every place else in order to disarm the American people and to replace our leaders? Well, the precedent is there. I hope to God it never happens.
Disclosed number of UN troops are now training on U.S. soil and could be used in America in some future state of national emergency, civil unrest such as the Los Angeles riots or other upheaval.
Ken Adams is with us. Ken, your microphone is back on.
Now, as far as our national sovereignty, we get very concerned about our national sovereignty with a number of the treaties, of course, NAFTA and GATT treaties that have recently been implemented. We're very concerned about some of the things that the United Nations is doing. We're concerned about some of the surveys that they're giving our military, asking if they'll fire upon U.S. citizens. Now, it's not our job to bring judgment upon that. That's up to the citizens. That's up to the American people to judge on what we bring them. But if we certainly, when we see a survey when our military is asked if they'll shoot American citizens or not, that's something that we feel we should bring to the public. Now, you decide, do you want your military in any way, shape, or form to come against the American people? If you do, and that's what the American people want, then that's what we will have. But if they don't, then they need to be very serious when they contact their elected officials about this.
There have been many, many stories about the potential or perhaps the possibility or the rumors of foreign troops on American soil? Are there U.S. troops, or I should say, are there foreign troops on U.S. soil, and if so, what are they here for?
Well, they certainly are. The number is difficult to confirm. We get telephone calls from militia members. First of all, Chuck, we have a number of military men that are in the militia.
We got about a minute left, so make good use of it.
Okay. That call us up and tell us that there are UN troops training at various different locations around the country. What their purpose is, you start really wondering when you see some of the military equipment that goes up and down our railroads and up and down our highways, and some of it is foreign equipment, Russian equipment, UN equipment. It leaves the door open to a lot of speculation on exactly what's taking place in this country.
Anything solid?
Solid as far as facts. We certainly have to be concerned about a possible national emergency, Executive Order 12919 taking effect, where FEMA will basically declare martial law. Will our military people follow that, or will they have to have UN troops? Those are scenarios. It's hard to tell the future. I don't have a crystal ball.
Why are foreign troops training at Fort Polk, Louisiana? What in the world are these Soviet-made helicopters doing over a U.S. military installation? Polk is the United Nations North American Training Center, where troops from some 40 countries have undergone training in urban warfare.
Able to see a map right now of the United States. And some of the markings that you see indicate United Nations combat groups' confirmed locations, and another would indicate the internment camps that have been confirmed also.
And Rexella, the thing is, this is why these militiamen are concerned as to what may happen in the next 24 to 36 months because of these bases all throughout the country. I'm going to be quoting now from Senator Sam Nunn on planned joint United States-Russian military maneuvers in the United States, and this is from the New York Times, June 1st, 1994. He said, "I think our American people will welcome a Russian military force for peacekeeping purposes." Now, I'm going to be quoting from that source that Jack mentioned a moment ago, the Relevance Research source. The estimates of foreign troops range from mere handfuls of men scattered across a few bases for routine specialty training to wild reports of combat battle groups concealed inside our national parks or in vital underground cities throughout the nation, and totaling up to 500,000 men. That's a little scary. Motorists in several states have photographed trainloads of military armed equipment being transported on our roads and by rail. We contacted spokesmen from several United States bases who have confirmed to Relevance, that's this paper, that foreign military personnel, in some cases up to battalion strength, have recently trained in such bases as Fort Polk in Louisiana, Fort Lewis in the state of Washington, and Fort Benning in Georgia. Now, there are 3 bases right now, Jack, where they are actually training 500,000 right. men.
And they have actually taken photographs of these UN Army personnel in Saucier, Mississippi, in Gulfport, Mississippi, in New Orleans, Louisiana, in western Texas, where they saw 100 rail cars with UN equipment and many Russian tanks, right here in Michigan, and there's reason for concern.
Now, what is the strength of UN forces inside the United States? The guesstimations, including reliable numbers, is approximately 300,000 total. It could be higher. We do not have an accurate count. In the last 48 hours at Biloxi, we've had a vast influx of foreign aircraft and foreign military personnel. At a series of other military bases, and we have some photographs here of those particular sites, a large number of foreign military forces have been entering over the last 48 hours also. Does this mean that we have to panic? No, it means that we pay attention and we have good patriots who are already watching to see what's going to happen there. Has the other side become aggressive? Well, in almost every case where public citizens have gone overtly to the gates and to the fences, they have threatened to shoot them in every incident so far. So we have a confrontational situation that exists right now. Many patriots around the country are using a basic program that we set up, in which, first of all, you need a ledger. When you see something, don't guess, don't secondhand, don't paraphrase. Who, what, where, when. What were you doing? what were they doing? Photographs, if at all possible. 110 or 35 millimeter throwaway cameras are very simple to use. You will not cry if somebody steals them from your car, but you will have some form of photographic ledger of what happened, a document. A number of foreign forces are definitely in both Louisiana and Mississippi. We know that foreign troops are deployed through FinCEN and through the United Nations combat groups throughout the continental United States in different garrison form or training form. And one of the pieces that I have in my briefcase, which later on when we're done here you can look at, are little bits of newspaper clippings from operations in different parts of the country that have taken place over the last month. Dutch, Russian, etc. Now again, this all comes back to, well, what are we going to do with all these here foreign troops? Well, it's pretty straightforward. If American soldiers will not fire on American citizens, and if you're a part of the New World Order, then it's very straightforward that you do what the Chinese did when they had a problem in Tiananmen Square. You bring kids from outside to play on the block.
So here our boys are, rubbing shoulders with the Soviets. They call it the former Soviet Union. Americans and Russians working together in this peacekeeping operation. Now this is a news release from Peacekeeper 95. It was in the Kansas Prairie just last month, where Russian and U.S. troops worked together. They say it's not for release, so let's read it. Plans are underway by the Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Shelley Kashvali, to present the Peacekeeper 95 operation ceremony Tuesday at 10. Well, we know he's part of it, don't we? Talks about their troops being flown in, another non-release. Russian soldiers arrive at McCord Air Force Base in Fort Riley, Kansas. Now this is Camp Ripley, Minnesota. My wife and I just came through that area probably 2-3 weeks ago on a speaking tour. We spoke to a lot of folks in the area that had witnessed UN peacekeeping forces practicing in Camp Ripley with their blue helmets, with their guard towers with UN symbols and the letters UN on them, with the equipment flying the UN flag and UN stickers on the sides of them. Yet there's nothing going on sinister in America with UN, right? Wrong.
Fort Polk will be the site of a major NATO exercise involving 14 Central and Eastern European countries, including the Czech Republic, Poland, and Romania. It's part of what NATO and the Pentagon are calling the Partnership for Peace program.
This is a military document. Actually, this is an official publication, Military Review, the Professional Journal of the United States Army, December 1992, and ladies and gentlemen, it's a puzzle. Well, you'll notice I'm circling, and you might look to, of course, the center, and you'll find the pivot of the clock. The center of the puzzle is the United Nations. But first, we must enter by the proper door. And so, on December 1992, the proper entrance point of the puzzle would be New World Order. This wasn't made up by the Patriot movement. This document can be found in your library locally, along with many other documents that support the same view.
This is Operation Cooperative Nugget 95. It went from the first part of August to the last of August. In this operation, they provided a film for public consumption through the media. However, when you analyze closely what they've been up to, they have painted over UN signs that they think you can't see on television. Yet you can look right through their paint, and in huge black letters under the paint you can still see UN. And they tried to hide the UN armbands. They're still there. You can see what they're up to. Now, it was all orchestrated through the Allied Command. According to this document, June 26th of 95, Exercise Cooperative Nugget 95.
Cooperative Nugget 95, Partnership for Peace. It might be noted, of course, ladies and gentlemen, this was purely a United Nations exercise. One of the best examples being, of course, the fact that almost all of the props, almost all of the insignia and heraldry that was tied into it had to do with United Nations military operations. From the United Nations National Police Force to, of course, ground operations for search and seizure of firearms. With Cooperative Nugget, it can be demonstrated, and I think we're going to show you, shall we say, a few knocks on the door in the twilight hours. Alexander Solzhenitsyn spoke about such activities and reminded people that if they had simply waited for them in the twilight hours when they did arrive and stopped them in their tracks, the bloody machine would have ground to a halt. Well, what you're seeing now, ladies and gentlemen, are shades and visions of things to come. That's right, National Police Force. And what do those armbands say? United Nations. Well, search and seizure and force operations of this type are what were being demonstrated at Fort Polk, and every international element that was there got a chance to practice. A little point that should be made is that when the British were involved with this particular phase of the exercise and they entered the structure, they wouldn't let the camera crews enter with them. Why? Well, the policy of the British forces entering any structures, homes, businesses, or whatever, is to kill everybody. Men, women, cats, dogs, kids, everybody. Now, can this be demonstrated? Well, for your benefit, we have a couple of hours of footage that was done by different crews who were live and on location during Operation Cooperative Nugget. And one of the complaints is that during the British phase and one of the Russian phases, when these particular search and seizure actions were taking place, well, they didn't want the camera crews there to shoot what was really being shot. When asked where the prisoners were that would normally be taken out of the building during this phase, the American instructors commented rather quietly that there were no prisoners. The footage that you just saw here shows the New World Order in its prime. The knock at the door at 3 in the morning, as Solzhenitsyn described, the wretched machine going from door to door, searching for your weapons. To our north in Canada right now, ladies and gentlemen, something that, again, most people said was not possible, the Canadian government has passed sweeping gun bans, threatening house-to-house search and seizure, just as you saw in this tape a moment ago, in which the weapons will be taken from the Canadian people. That's why that man you saw is beating on the door, and he's not asking for permission to come in. He's simply going through the motions so that the men with the AK-47s, the AK-74s, the SIG assault rifles, the G3s, the FNFALs, so that they can come in right behind him. And again, we have virtually hours of the footage of these particular training exercises, and they are not pretty at all, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, it is only a matter of time before the people that you saw knocking on doors, before the people you see driving these funny white tanks with the strange letters on the side, decide that they have to enforce the New World Order's laws in Louisiana, or in Missouri, or in Florida, or in Kentucky, or wherever.
The way they plan to bring this about, if they have their way, is they want this to appear as a democratic grassroots movement, something that is coming from the bottom up. I believe at a moment in time, maybe a couple years down the road, I don't know when the world's climate is just right, maybe when we're in the middle of a financial crisis and maybe a Middle East crisis or something, when the world is in turmoil, it would not surprise me if these people would step forward and present the world government as a cure-all for everything. The number one issue they're going to use is the environment. The second issue they're going to use is the world debt situation. They will propose the world government to cure our world debt situation. They will also say that we need a world government to maintain world peace. Those will be the big issues. If they cannot bring it about by manipulating us into supporting the world government through the democratic process, then there are other mechanisms in place whereby they could try to force this world government upon us. That, to me, would actually be better, because then their true colors would be seen. The dates that they have set are 1993 to 1998. These are not dates I am setting, but they want to go public with their effort between those years. It would not surprise me if this takes place. They're right on track right now.
Well, I want you to know about some things that are coming. There's a lot of talk, and it's pretty proven, by the way. It's not just idle rumors about black helicopters. They're the militias that are forming up around the country. There's even talk of detention centers being set up, concentration camps, foreign military units and equipment being seen, observed throughout the United States. What about that? It sounds a little crazy, doesn't it? It really does. You know, as I begin to get more and more reports over the years of these so-called black helicopters and the possibility that there actually could be a plan to build concentration camps to put us in, I decided to do more than just ask questions. I decided to really investigate this. Now, God has given me a lot of tools of investigation. I have a lot of friends out there. Some are former CIA, some are presently in intelligence, And some I can trust and some I can't trust. And some are old Air Force friends of mine now in various government agencies, because I spent over 20 years in the Air Force, retired as an officer.
Local, state, or military helicopters with greatly increased frequency are overflying cities, towns, neighborhoods, and individual houses at low levels, looking for drugs, for surveillance, or for intimidation purposes. Many of these helicopters are black and unmarked, and we're getting reports from all over the country. Major cities are seeing them overflying neighborhoods.
We have black helicopters. We've always heard of this black helicopter stuff. So what are all these black helicopters doing here, folks? We have a book that we offer. It helps explain it. It's called Black Helicopters Over America, Strike Force of the New World Order.
Many of the people that I've been in contact so far are both intelligence analysts or have worked as intelligence analysts and counterintelligence sergeants. They are experienced in observation and they know what they're doing. Because of this, we can rely upon their first-hand information. Most of the time, though, you're seeing FinCEN forces utilizing rotary wing aircraft assets. Back in the early part of 1990, approximately 3,000 rotary wing aircraft were withdrawn from our strategic reserve. These are not from the reserve or guard. These came from the mothball fleet. Upon implementing this force, these units were transferred to FinCEN, painted in the flat black, not flat green, and not camouflage green. These aircraft are in flat black. They bear no markings or identification to determine whether they are American or foreign national. And the fact of the matter is they are now foreign national assets, no longer in the hands of the United States Air Force.
Infamous black helicopters. Rumors of presidential hit squads. One black helicopter actually demolished the house right next door, maybe hit the wrong target, demolished the house. Helicopters came in and demolished the house next door to the man who was running the impeach Bill Clinton campaign. That happened right here in Texas. We even saw helicopters in very strange modes of operation right here in Travis County, Austin. 3 of my employees saw this and we reported it. And we could talk about some things that happened there. But black helicopters are seen all over this nation, as well as foreign troops.
My question is somewhat local. I heard about 12 weeks ago that there were a group of black helicopters. I believe the unit was the 160th, if I've read things correctly. It wasn't reported, though, only once on the radio around Columbus, Ohio. Is this generally the case, that they're kept so quiet?
Not only are they kept quiet, but even, and in fact we've had people do this where they've driven by a site where the helicopters are sitting right next to a police post, for instance, and women or men will call in and say, who owns those black helicopters, you know, that are by the police station? And the sergeant on duty will respond, what black helicopters, ma'am? And then, of course, they'll get a little agitated, and she goes, those blankety-blank helicopters next to your building, bonehead. Or, well, those helicopters are part of a special operation, and we cannot divulge information on at this time. Then, of course, they'll quickly disappear, and any other conversation after that is, well, there were no black helicopters. If you call the Federal Aviation people, 90% of the time they will tell you flat out, there is no such thing as black helicopters.
There have been many, many stories about the potential or perhaps the possibility or the rumors of foreign troops on American soil. We have a box full of pictures of these black unmarked helicopters. I called the FAA, and they told me that it was a covert activity. They would tell me nothing more. They said, yes, they knew all about them. And I said, well, I believe the civil air regulations, the CAR, and the FAR, I believe, require all aircraft to be marked. I know when I was a pilot that my plane had to be marked. How do they get away with it? Well, the gentleman at the FAA was silent on that matter. He said, we know they're there and it's a covert action or activity. Now, we have a box full of pictures of these things. People have taken videotape of these black helicopters flying menacingly over their homes and farms. So that's how we got involved. And, of course, the minute we started asking questions, they called us cuckoos. But when we come back, we'd like you to tell us what you think they are, and are there foreign troops on American soil? And if so, why? Don't go away. We are back, and we're going to ask Ken to read you. Ken, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. Ken Adams is the Public Relations Director of the Michigan Militia. 2 questions quickly. What are the black helicopters? Number 2, are there foreign troops on U.S. soil, and why are they here?
Okay. Well, the black helicopter issue, as you have experienced, nobody's really talking about what they're doing.
I have personally seen them. We saw 4 of them fly over the hotel here July 4th, about 2:30 in the afternoon. And they were flying over here earlier, and we complained to the FAA, and they finally stopped. That much I can tell you.
Right.
Well, we've seen helicopters, you know, the report of black helicopters all over the country.
I believe that because when they went over on July 4th, they went over at treetop level, and I made eye contact with the pilot, who made eye contact with me, and he was not dressed up as Santa Claus, I can tell you that.
The photographs that I showed you, some of them just came through and not all of you got a chance to see them. Forgive me for this. What you see there are T-72 main battle tanks, ZSU 23-4 air defense carriages, SAM-6 self-propelled air defense missile systems. We have photographs of Frog 7s, and these are the original photographs or blow-ups off the negatives. If you would like copies of these, you call John, and in fact, if you want to get hold of us, here's the numbers and the address. I want to do that before you leave, and everybody is scrambling for a pen and paper, I know. So I'm not going to do it right away. Go right ahead, find a pen and paper. A lot of what you're seeing here, this is only one finger again of what we're facing with the New World Order crowd. Somebody asked me, why Russian equipment? Well, because they're dumping a lot of our American equipment into the ocean right now. Because the troops that you're going to face, which are twice the numbers originally expected, are for the most part going to be Russian. Any of you who are adept students of the United Nations know that as long as the UN has been in place, while it is in place today and for as long as it will exist, a Russian general commands all United Nations forces through the United Nations headquarters, and that is the way it will always be under the contract. Now, a most interesting set of numbers were just released about Russian military force, and it has been discovered that their actual strength is twice what they have been reporting.
Now, what they're going to do when it comes time to enforce it, they will by that time have sufficient amount of weaponry in the United States pre-placed, if you will, that will be some of its Soviet material and German material, East German and the Soviet bloc weaponry. At that time, that material will be here, and will be enough of it so that when they fly in the extra manpower that will come from the Eastern Bloc and from Russia, the Soviets, they will then have all their equipment already here pre-planned. If you will notice now on this next little bit of footage, this will show you Russian short-range Frog missiles. These missiles are, matter of fact, this is live footage. These are photographed in several different places also in the United States. These missiles are good for only 50 miles, folks. They are chemical, biological, or nuclear. They have a 50-mile range. They are in the middle of Texas and Tennessee and in other areas. You have to ask yourself, what is all this Russian equipment doing here?
This is Soviet missiles here in America. The top one is Virginia, just a couple of months ago. This is a 4-tail unit on a mobile missile launcher. The bottom one is one out of Texas, I believe, at a truck stop. It's even got the red star on it yet. They really don't care how bad they insult us, apparently. Now this unit here, maybe a little difficult to see, but this is a Soviet Bear bomber. This was at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. This unit is coming into our country now in September of 1994. I witnessed 7 of these units come over little tiny Knoxon, Montana, headed in a north-northeasterly direction. If you ever hear one of these planes, you'll never forget it. They're a counter-rotating turboprop. They have a very narrow fuselage. That's one way to recognize the style, with propellers on it. But they have 2 propellers per engine, not just one. And that's why they sound so low in pitch.
Now, as you can see from this, this next little bit of footage, this is possibly some of the most amazing, upsetting footage that you're going to see on this video. At this location, you see 1,500 pieces of chemical and biological weaponry. These are reconnaissance units that are utilized along with the T-72 Russian tanks. This material you're looking at right here is ongoing footage. This is all located down south presently mostly in the Louisiana area. These are reconnaissance units for chemical and biological weaponry. If you can get a look at this, it's amazing. This goes on and on. If you'll notice, half of them or some of them now at this point in time have been painted the friendly United Nations white. These units are supposedly were brought in, according to the people involved, to be repainted and then shipped out again, which of course is ludicrous since it would cost you $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 each per trip, one direction over and another $5,000 to ship it back. And I guess on that basis we're to believe that there just is no paint in Europe, that they could just paint these and then ship them wherever they plan to go with them. These are brought in to be used in the United States.
These are more UN pieces of equipment. Looks like Russian and German stuff from way back. This was going into Texas on I-10 last part of October of this year. Now this many of you have probably seen. These are chemical command posts, or reconnaissance units. This particular picture was Saucier, Mississippi, which they say they brought these vehicles here from East Germany to paint. Well, I think it's cheaper to send a can of paint over there than to send the whole vehicle over here unless their talent has diminished that much. Those same basic vehicles are showing up other places in the country, like Stewart and Stevens, right out of Houston, Texas, 70 miles to the west. Now it shows these same reconnaissance units, some of which are being changed from Wausau green to UN white at Airmar Resources in the little town of Mississippi, Saucier, Mississippi. Now this is an aerial photo of that little encampment that says they have just a few vehicles there. They're there by the hundreds, if not thousands, folks, all over the place. That's only part of what we were able to get. So much for their can of paint. This is a bill of lading that miraculously flew over the fence and into one of our hands off the windshield of one of these trucks. It says reserved for the UN.
And I guess, now again, to remind you, there are 2,100 plus trucks on site. The most recent report that we have now they are moving the trucks, by the way, but the most recent report we have from the stevedores and from the longshoremen on the docks, the next shipment will all be armor. None of it will be trucks from this point on. So they're bringing in PCs and tanks, mostly T-72. We have several photographs which we can send back up. We have flatbed T-72s that were being run up 75 and down I-75 in Florida. Fortunately, it was an 85-year-old grandmother in a Taurus who had a lead foot that caught him. She was going the other way. Her granddaughter was with her, and her granddaughter knew what Mom and Dad said. She said, "Grandma, we got to catch those trucks." So Grandma did a U-turn across the interchange and zipped down the road, and this thing was doing 85 miles an hour. They had to catch it. So not only did she do 85 miles an hour, but whatever was required in between, and she got some good rear-end pictures of these things going down the road in convoy. And they were all fully equipped T-72s. They were far and again exceeding the speed limit. Right now, I don't know if everybody's noticed this, but they're getting hard on the truckers, especially to travel over any kind of any excessive speed at all. We've been driving 6 and 8 hours and 10 hours a day, one way on the road. There are trucks pulled over left and right if they're doing 5 miles over the speed limit. So the fact that these things are hell-bent for election, maintaining an 85-mile-an-hour speed limit on I-75 in Florida is rather interesting.
The top photo here is a tank that they say they only have a few of for experimentation and training of our troops with Soviet equipment. That's a Soviet T-72 tank, one of many. This was taken in Texas, one of 2 tanks that were sitting in a Exxon parking lot. We've had these tanks spotted in Louisiana.
This T-72 tank is, as I say, being brought in. There are thousands upon thousands of these tanks in Mexico, which they brought in under everybody's nose, right in front of everybody a short while back. The amount of military Russian equipment in Mexico, just across the border, is mind-boggling. But we also have mind-boggling pieces of equipment here.
In Cleveland, for instance, we have friends and patriots who have photographed UN armor being transported by rail from east to west. Many of the people that I've been in contact so far are both intelligence analysts or have worked as intelligence analysts and counterintelligence sergeants. They are experienced in observation and they know what they're doing. Because of this, we can rely upon their first-hand information.
The top picture you see are urban assault units, like in what they assaulted Vietnam with as they were leaving, killing people directly with these pieces of equipment. The bottom pictures are 113s and 114s, U.S., but now they're UN equipment. This is taken in Montana. If you could see closer, you'd see the snowy mountains in the background. I'm just going to breeze through a bunch of these. This is the UN Red Cross here in America. This is taken in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the 10th or the 11th of October. This is more of Montana, the top one. It's a UN helicopter in Billings, Montana, in June of this year.
Well, there's much more on the horizon, and United Nations equipment has been spotted, supposedly not verified, and not identified across the United States. Well, let me help you with some of this. We have documented evidence from all over the United States, from Alabama to Mississippi, from Florida to New York to California at LA Airport, where helicopters have been delivered, specifically stenciled United Nations, all white, and as National Police Force vehicles. These aircraft are still being used across California and are also showing up in Michigan, Washington State, Minnesota, etc. Well, let me throw a little point out here for you. In this image, again, a picture says 1,000 words. United States Army warning, entering Fort Polk Military Reservation entrance only, entrance only is approved by the post commander. Entry on this post constitutes consent to search person and vehicle at any time. Criminal and traffic offenses are strictly enforced. Violators are subject to the UCMJ and or the United States codes. You might notice what's behind this sign. Well, yes, those are U.S. or, well, international Humvees now, all marked United Nations, etc. And this is one of Fort Polk's many motor pools.
Are the Russian trucks down in Mississippi? I've run into 3 people who were absolutely against the possibility that those things could be there. The last one was in Connecticut. He went down, talked to the people there. Well, what he is, he took pictures, and as he tried to leave, somebody came out of the compound and stopped him. You know, well, who are you? Well, who are you? Well, I work here. Who are you? Oh, well, I'm just taking some pictures of these things because I want to buy some. Oh, well, they're privately owned. He goes, oh, well, good. Who's the owner? I want to talk to him. Well, they're not really privately owned. They're government owned. Oh, well, they're government owned. Well, then the government must want to sell them, right? What agency of the government owns them? Well, they're not really the government. It's the United Nations. And it's like, oh, well, who's selling these things? Well, they're really not for sale. Well, wait a minute now. So they're progressively, it's like a half-truth, half-truth, half-truth. Oh, gee, finally square between the eyes. And, of course, the big concern is, well, why are you taking these pictures and where are you going with them? If there's nothing wrong and if everything's okay, why worry about photographing things?
Guess what they're doing while they bring in this Russian equipment on a regular basis, expanding the amount of it and stashing this. They're hiding this away in a variety of locations. Guess what they're doing at the same time with ours? As you can see this picture, which is not very clear, but nonetheless it's fairly presentable. This photo will show you that they are, in fact, cutting up our B-52s. These are $27 million each. They are chopping them into pieces in the desert. The lower half of this picture shows the ones that have already been cut. The upper top part of the photograph you can make out are the ones that are in line to be destroyed. While they bring this tremendous amount of tanks and armored personnel units into the United States from Russia and Germany, they are also throwing our tanks into the ocean. You can see here with this picture shows one of our tanks being pushed off. They're doing this to several thousand, whatever the numbers are. It's what I would refer to rather an expensive fish tank. These are worth probably $8 or $10 million, even as used units. But the last thing they need is anyone else in the United States, like American Patriots, to get their hands on them. Those are going into the ocean while they bring in the T-72 Russian units.
Now, while the Soviet T-72 is brought to our nation and roams our soil, we have our M-60s dropped in the ocean. 3,000 out of whack. Yet they say that this is obsolete equipment from Vietnam. This was made as late as 1989. I think it's because a few of our people still know how to run the controls of these machines, and they don't want us using them. Warships just go to scrap. One of our aircraft carriers out in Bremerton being chopped up, sold to the highest bidder, or probably sunk also. Our B-52s are being chopped up, folks. The wings are being cut off by a 13-ton guillotine, and the fuselages are being cut in 3 pieces. As they do each one, our people back away, and a Soviet satellite moves in for the photo to verify it. So I guess we don't really have to wonder why we have Lenin in the park, do we? I take this real serious, what's going on with my country.
At this point, we're not sure, in fact, not sure who's pulling the strings on this one, since they brought the Russians in, all the way in, as a matter of fact, to our highest level security bases, where we store our plutonium at this time in the United States. Some of the underground facilities where it actually requires a palm scan, where you put your hand down on a scanning system to get read and be admitted into this particular bases. They've already brought them in and relabeled under Russian supervision, or at least in their cooperation. They relabeled the plutonium as property of the United Nations, and now permitting the Russian high brass, if you will, into some of our most exclusive bases. That's being done. Bill Clinton did another slick one actually only a few weeks ago, at the beginning of March, or excuse me, the beginning of February. Bill Clinton removed the keys from the nuclear retaliatory strike force on our submarines. They've been taken from the commander and put into a vault on board the ship, on board the submarines. However, the launching keys for a retaliatory or protective strike, nuclear, from our submarines have been taken away from the commanders, put into a safe, and the safe now can only be opened by receiving a special coded message that must come from the president. So not only are they destroying some of our weapons, they're restricting the activities of some of our weapons, while still bringing, of course, more weaponry into the United States from Russia.
It's very interesting. You travel down to Big Bend National Park. I'm from Texas, and you go down to Big Bend National Park, and guess what? There is no more Big Bend National Park. It's now Big Bend International Park.
The parks across the country, they were showing up with these signs. Mount Mitchell State Park, North Carolina, United Nations Biosphere Reserve. But the public put so much pressure on that they had to do something. The United Nations removed their sign from the park, or removed their letters from the sign. Actually, what they did is just turn the plank around backwards. That's the back of that same sign. So don't tell me we can't make a difference. But they always come back, slide under the rug, and pop out another place of the carpet. So this is what they're reading now across the country. This is Great Smoky Mountain National Park, an International Biosphere Reserve. So instead of the United Nations, we have International Biosphere. So when you see that, folks, that's what you're actually looking at, is the UN system.
The enemy's capability to utilize electronic warfare technology against us was displayed during this little Kentucky bout with the kids that were lost in the Smoky Mountains International Biosphere. Oh, that's right. They didn't call it that, did they? They called it a national forest. Isn't that amazing how our national service made a point of not calling it a biosphere? In the Kentucky mountains right now, that particular forest has a sign as you enter the area. It says International Biosphere. In all the news reports I saw, they didn't use the new proper title. They used that old American thing so that we wouldn't get people upset. Made a point of calling it a national forest, which it isn't anymore. But during that, I think it should be noted by everybody, the kids were found utilizing special technology, and they were picked up by very special people in black uniforms. And before they would be released, it was stated they refused to let the children go until they were debriefed. Now I got to ask myself, Why would you debrief a bunch of high school kids who were supposedly lost in the middle of the mountains? What is it that they saw that they felt the government wouldn't want other people to see or talk about? So much so that they said they wouldn't release them until they were debriefed. Interesting.
For all of you who don't know this, to make sure you're up to speed, Mikhail Gorbachev, you know, the bad communist who was in charge before the good communist Boris Yeltsin came in? Okay, the bad communist, yeah, they kicked him out, but where did he go? They brought him to the United States. He presently has offices in the Presidio in San Francisco. The Presidio is now an international biosphere and has been declared so. It is the only urban international biosphere on the planet. The gentleman that we're talking about, Mr. Gorbachev, a man who was a devout communist, a person who was facing us and of course was our enemy and still is one of the 3 men in charge of all base closings in the United States.
An interesting twist if you think that communism is dead. For years, using the proper techniques in propaganda, many people who called Alan Cranston a communist were ridden into the ground. Well, Comrade Gorbachev now is working as the coordinator of base closings in the United States as a director under the Clinton administration. He works out of the Presidio. His number 2 man presently working for him is Alan Cranston, who is presently working out of the Presidio also. Strange, or is that bedfellows? Maybe the 2 words go together. Is it an accident? No. Are you conditioned not to think? Yes. Now, I came into this originally back in 1975, 76, totally ignorant of any of what we're talking about now. I was well trained as an intelligence analyst and as a counterintelligence coordinator, but first as an intelligence analyst. I never put a name on something I haven't done research on extensively. And in fact, anybody who's dealt with intelligence knows that the first thing that you learn to write is a question mark. Everything is done with verifiers, multiple verifiers, and still a question mark is left in place because you understand the word counterintelligence, disinformation. I've come a long trail to get to where I am right now. I am by no means ignorant of my enemy. I worked for the other side.
And speaking of plans, as I had mentioned earlier, I'm going to show you here where the Gorbachev Foundation, which is now functioning full-time in San Francisco. For those of you that did not know where Gorbachev had gone or disappeared to, old Mikhail is running his show, if you will, in the Presidio base in San Francisco. As you can see from this paperwork, as a matter of fact, this was done by Senator Cranston. He was the one that set up and did special, actual congressional paperwork to permit the Gorbachev Foundation to move in and function in Frisco. He did some fancy footsteps, and he now is, of course, functioning as a co-chairman of the Gorbachev Foundation. And in the book that we talked about earlier on this video, in the exposure of the United Nations, in that particular book, it spells out 40 years ago, the gentleman wrote in there and he said, one person you have to be very aware of is that Mr. Senator Cranston is a communist working towards the New World Order, one world government. And that was 40 years ago. As we speak, he is in San Francisco with the Gorbachev Foundation functioning full-time. So again, we get back to where the folks are constantly liking to point a finger at us and calling us or referring to us as the conspiracy freaks. If it was planned and organized and put together by people 30, 40 years ago, right after they created the United Nations, to do what they're doing to you today and to your grandchildren next year, it's not a conspiracy freak. That is a conspiracy, folks. Open up your eyes and let's find out what's happening.
Развернулся в своем движении в другом направлении, к новому мировому порядку,
I
к
think
новой цивилизации.
even that does not describe why the world has changed so much and why the world has turned so much toward a new world order and a new kind of civilization.
This is a very recent document. This is from the Gorbachev Foundation out of Presidio, California. It gives us address, phone number. State of the World Forum from September 27th to October 1 of this year. They had a summit there called Toward a New Civilization. What's wrong with our civilization, folks? Why would they make a statement like that? What's behind the scenes here? Some of the statements they made: we are giving up, or we are giving birth to the first global civilization. They talk about the different phases of human development. Whenever you see the word development, you should be real concerned with the sinister thoughts they have in mind for us. Anyhow, the opening chair was Mikhail Gorbachev. Some of the chairs were Secretary George Shultz, used to be Secretary of State, Mr. Ted Turner, Mr. CNN, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Wow. What's this country coming to? Now, seated at table 15 was Colin Powell. For those of you that are thinking about voting for him, you'll know where his heart's at. But at table 9 was Ted Turner. And the topic at his table was facing the planet's carrying capacity.
Here is a newsletter which quotes Ted Turner. He's one of the friends of Bill and Hillary Clinton. Talk about death. You know what he says? Let me read to you what Ted Turner says. First he says, we've got to rebuild the whole world. Oh, sure, reinvent the world. That's what these people want. It was reported in Audubon magazine, December 1991, that Ted Turner, Bill Clinton's buddy, Jane Fonda, as you know, is his wife, and he's been made by the Clintons to be their population ambassador to the United Nations. Ted Turner says we have too many people on this planet. He says we need to get rid of 98% of the people on this planet. 98% of the people, oh, I guess he's going to be one of those lucky 2% that are able to stay here and survive. He says, quote, right now there are way too many people on the planet. If we had an ethic, we could cut back to 250 million to 350 million people. My friends, there are 6 billion people almost on this planet. He is saying that we need to slaughter or get rid of 5.5 billion or more.
It's showing up in a lot of different magazines. I think this one was a New American. Henry Kissinger declares the population reduction is a national security goal of the United States. Why? Now there's a man during the Jimmy Carter regime that did a study for Carter. His name is James Gustav Speth. He is now the president of the United Nations Development Program. The report indicated that by the year 2000 they have to reduce the population to 2 billion, when in fact they expect the population to reach 6 billion. So you could say, folks, that would be 2 out of every 3 that are here today must be eliminated by the year 2000. I don't think that's going to happen through reproductive plans. That man is now the president of this United Nations organization. The Human Development Report for '94, the United Nations Development Program. So why would they be building a mausoleum in Florida? A mausoleum that's 495 feet tall, right alongside the interstate, that would hold the cremated remains of more than 1.3 million people. Why? This came out of the Tampa Tribune, January 2, 1995. So how would they orchestrate all these sinister things or sinister plans that they have against us?
In many cases, many federal employees are starting to realize what they're involved with. We've had Treasury agents come up who were ready to retire who said, Mark, you cannot imagine what they are asking us to do and what they are planning on doing in America. I have to retire and leave now. And these are men with 29 years or 28 years of seniority, and they have a different mindset, and they were trained differently, and they have a conscience, and they probably really do have morals. And for that reason, they've had to step away. And like the man said, I can't tell you because under law I'm restricted, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to tell you.
Under a full state of emergency, tens or hundreds of thousands of Americans suspected of so-called hate crimes, environmental crimes, financial or gun control crimes, or or criminal violation of any of the tens of thousands of new government regulations or resistance to the New World Order or socialist America are likely to be imprisoned. Perhaps this is why Bush more than doubled the prison capacity in the United States. It is believed that there are at least 24 large federal detention centers in the United States today. Most of these are empty. They are guarded by federal officials. They will deny that they're there. I have friends who have seen at least a few of them.
Let me give you one report from one group. These are people, I've talked to the gentleman, Mr. T.C. Fry. He seems actually like he might be sane. Yeah, he might be okay. But here's what he states. He says, did you know that there are 4 massive crematoriums in the United States of America, now complete with gas chambers and guillotines? That they can handle more than 3,000 cremations each day? That the chief one is the old Amtrak repair station in Indianapolis, Indiana? That other huge crematoriums are in or near Oklahoma City and Kansas City, Missouri? Well, my good friend R.E. McMaster says in his The Reaper report something very interesting. He says, quote, FEMA concentrates efforts and finances on detention camps and facilities for dissident civilians. FEMA is a New World Order agency for concentration camps. Their facilities now total 43. Each site can hold 32,000 to 42,000 detainees. Oklahoma City is the processing point west of the Mississippi.
The original prison camp mechanism, which we didn't discuss in the last 2 hours, I want to discuss now because it originated under FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, and was initiated under Zbigniew Brzezinski in 1976 through 1979. Zbigniew Brzezinski continued with his activities into the Reagan administration by 2 years. During this period, FEMA authorized 23 specific field detention camps to be pre-deployed in different parts of the country. Beyond this, an additional 20 camps were authorized under a DoD budget amendment, which was signed into power along with the DoD budget for 1989-1990, for a total of at least 43 primary camps inside the United States. In addition to this, there are 10 specific regional processing centers that are now being talked about, which we knew about a year ago. The Christian Science Monitor, Tuesday, February 15th, 1994. The article was written by John Dillon, staff writer of the Christian Science Monitor, Washington. If you want to find a copy, go get one. All that this does is simply confirm earlier intelligence data, which has been very reliable, most of it overt. If you think that we're going and cracking safes on this, you're wrong, or in other words, not. What in reality we're doing is going right to your House of Representative member and your Senate member, to the Federal Register, etc., and we are drawing out of the documents information that is overtly available to the public. Even though it is overtly available to the public, the media will refuse to print it. And in fact, I challenge, as some people here found out the hard way, I challenge that you go to the media and discuss the issue with them. The first thing they'll want to know is, and what is your name? And what is your phone number? And where do you live?
You can see we have Newt Gingrich back in 1990 passing or attempting to pass Bill 4079 and outlining, if you will, some amazing concepts, one of which was the creation of military prison camps on the military bases for civilians. Well, now, that's pretty spooky because obviously you get back to thinking about 1941 and 38 in Germany. But then there's an awful lot of things going on in the United States that fits that bill. Amazingly, as it may seem here in the United States, as you can see from the document that you see in front of you right now, exactly what Newt Gingrich had originally laid out, and that was for the creation of civilian prison labor camps, is now underway in the United States of America, as you can see from this document. This document is actually out of the U.S. Army, was put together a few months ago back in 1994. Presently, Fort Dix, which was previously a major military training center in a few different areas for the Army, that has already been converted, does already have civilian labor prisoners there presently. Several others that are being created. Matter of fact, as you can look here at this footage, you can see actual live footage of a huge civilian labor camp. This happens to be a federal federal camp that is called a transfer center. There are thousands of small cubicles inside this building. This is in Oklahoma. As you can see from this footage, it's really profuse. I'm going to let that run for a bit so you can see what's involved there. This is one of 3 such bases and type units. They're being constructed in conjunction with airports. One of them, which is being done in Pollock, in the Mississippi, Alabama area. This particular, it's Louisiana. This particular one was $80 million construction grant. 3 of these special bases are actually being done in conjunction with airports. And part of the actual paperwork on this says that it would be perfect. They are concealing the aircraft in a manner such that they can offload 747, 737 aircraft without being visually noticed from the ground or from the air. And the paperwork itself says that this would be ideal for separating men, women, and children for transportation to and from other prison points.
We also have something that's been cropping up all over the country, white 747s with very few windows, though they have some left, and absolutely no markings on them, not even a tail number marking. We know where they originated from, and I'll send a copy of this to several of you that are here. We have the blueprints, we have the construction photos, and we have the final photos of a routing prison located in Oklahoma City. Across from the prison, they have 747s. They're all white. They're refabricating them there, reconfiguring them.
That's the extermination camps.
Well, what we think it is, yes, before it's a final processing point for taking people to points and destinations unknown. The site looks like a massive pentagon. It literally looks like a fortress. Originally, the cover story was this was going to handle a handful of prisoners like Manuel Noriega. Going to have 1 or 2 people, small site, about the size of 3 or 4 houses. And when you have these maximum security people, they're going to fly right into Oklahoma City and then from there out. All of a sudden, the configuration changed. And we have the blueprints. All the cells are triangular in shape. I'm sorry, not triangular. They're pyramidal in shape. Okay? The number of cells exceeds 1,200. The number of people probably in a comfortable situation would be about 2004 to 2008. Realistically, you could cram probably 10 times that if you didn't worry about size. It is located right off the airport. It has a docking umbilicus to hook right up to 747s. It will accept any kind of aircraft, so the plane can fly up, the people never even hit the ground. The whole gist of the way the system is going to run is you'll be cell compartmentalized no matter what they do with you, no matter where you are. From the wholesale end, which would be the 747s, or the retail end, which is using the helicopters locally. They do not want to see anybody repatriated to the population in any way, shape, or form.
Extermination.
That's right. They can't afford anything else.
I came upon an interesting document. A man named William R. Pabst put out this booklet. You notice that it's not printed in the finest perfect binding with glossy cover. But the title is very descriptive. It simply is called Concentration Camp Plans for U.S. Citizens. Concentration Camp Plans for U.S. Citizens. Well, I wanted to know who Mr. Pabst was, and I tried to contact Mr. Pabst because this was put out in the 70s. I found that Mr. Pabst doesn't seem to exist anymore. He has vanished from the face of the planet Earth. But I know he did exist. I know because I have gone back and researched the court records, and I know that a William R. Pabst of Houston, Texas, sued the federal government. I know that also because I have in this booklet a copy of the lawsuit. And he sued the government, demanding that they provide information for 2 secretive projects, highly classified. And you know what? They didn't want him to have those plans. And they fought him tooth and nail. Now, let me read to you in the Federal Court of Appeals, I'm sorry, we'll go first to the U.S. District Court, what Judge Norman Black said. He says, what I have seen so far, Mr. Pabst, from your offer of proof indicates to me that there is no question, but there exists a program for the internment of prisoners of war and civilian internees. I don't think there is any question, however, that the documentation that you have shown me does not prove that the information should be released to you. The judge went on to say, you do not have jurisdiction. And there are other groups. Here's one, for example. It says these civilian concentration camps have been established under the Rex 84 program. And then he lists them, this individual, this organization. Fort Huachuca, Arizona, Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, Oakdale, California, Vandenberg Air Force Base, California, Eglin Air Force Base, Florida, Camp Crone, Florida, Fort Benning, Georgia, Fort Drum, New York, etc., etc. Well, could that be true? I mean, what is Rex 84? Is there such a program? Well, I'll go ahead and say that the New York Times says there was a Rex 84 program. They say that Oliver North was in charge of it, that William Casey, as the CIA director, was Ollie North's boss. And knowing Ollie North as I do, I can tell you, the guy's a no-good. He's a rat. And he did indeed give us Rex 84, a concentration camp program, a plan to round up dissenters and disruptors, so-called, of government, and to take away their constitutional rights and put them in so-called detention centers. These would be run by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. But by the way, you can go to the library and read about Rex 84. Go back into the files. Read what the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Associated Press said.
Here's one. The cover-up behind the Iran-Contra affair. Now, in 1980, it was exposed that there was a plan to build concentration camps here in the United States of America, pursuant to Executive Order 11490. Although this was exposed through a lawsuit by Dr. William R. Pabst, it did not reach the media absolutely censored this out, and the people of America did not know anything about it. Some years later, because of the Iran-Contra affair and because of the hearings, Representative Jack Brooks pressed Oliver North right to the wall, where he was going to ask him his involvement in a plan right now to suspend the Constitution of the United States and impose martial law in this country. To just let you hear for yourself, you're going to hear something right here that 99% of the people in this country have never heard. And these guys like Clinton and the folks behind this satanic force to try and destroy this country, they don't want you to hear this, but you're going to hear it right now. Come on, let's roll it right now, quickly.
Poindexter and Casey, you had a group of people who saw Americans who disagree with them as the enemy.
Colonel North, in your work at the NSC, were you not assigned at one time to work on plans for the continuity of government in the event of a major disaster?
Mr. Chairman. I believe that question touches upon a highly sensitive and classified area, so may I request that you not touch upon that, sir.
I was particularly concerned, Mr. Chairman, because I read in Miami papers and several others that there had been a plan developed by that same agency, a contingency plan in the event of emergency that would suspend the American Constitution. And I was deeply concerned about it and wondered if that was the area in which he had worked. I believe that it was,
May I most respectfully request that that matter not be touched upon at this stage. If we wish to get into this, I'm certain arrangements can be made for an executive session.
And tragically, the only member who got close was Jack Brooks, and he was stopped by the chairman. But the truth of the matter is that, yes, you do have those standby provisions, and the plans are there, and the statutory emergency plans are there, whereby you could, in the name of stopping terrorism, apprehend, invoke the military, and arrest Americans and hold them in detention camps.
It says, this is out of Washington, D.C., Associated Press, revenues from base land sales overestimated. Report says 88% of land from 1988 and 1991 base closings has been kept or transferred. Remember all those military bases they told you they were going to close and save you billions? They didn't do it. They've simply been turned over for other governmental uses. This report says that if you think America is going to save a lot of money from the base closings, don't believe it. Even if the military is not there, they're evidently being used for other purposes. It says there's been no property sales. These lands have been changed from one federal agency to another, and FEMA has been given a number of them. I wonder why.
This is the Department of the Army, August 29, 1994. And this talks about the Army regulations on civilian inmate labor utilization. Here comes the chain gangs. And establishing prison camps on Army installations. For instance, Fort Monroe, Virginia. This is where the documentation came from. Dean Rhodey, Director, Resource Management. Why does that word sound familiar? Now these documents here are the Federal Transfer Center in progress in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. That's been quite some time ago. Now the facility is about up and running. It's located right on the edge of the airport, where 747s can taxi right up to, can offload without the passengers ever touching the ground, without you even seeing the passenger. Federal Transfer Center. Now here's a federal detention facility at SeaTac. Will this also be a transfer center? And for what purpose? This is in Seattle, Washington. This is recent, but it's still basically the same design as that same unit in Oklahoma.
Ted has another comment. Ted?
You mentioned earlier on that they can't lock us all up. I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but the federal government is right now presently building 80 new prisons around the United States.
Do you think that these institutions are meant for the incarceration of American citizens?
Ted and I have decided to share the answer. We did a lot of research on this at the Law Loft last year. The short answer is yes. In other words, what I think you're looking at ultimately is forced labor camps.
And in addition to that, there are 80, as I said earlier, 80 new prisons being built in America today. Yes, I think that that's the purpose of this part of it. Yes.
Also, Ted, we got copies of what purport to be the contractor's design for that facility in Oklahoma City, and it has sorting bins for men, women, and children.
Very interesting newsletter from Pastor George Udvery. Now, let me tell you what he says. He's from the New Harmony Christian Crusade out of Mid-Pines, California. He wrote this in his newsletter. He says, I now find myself experiencing many of the same problems that plagued my country of Hungary under communist dictatorship nearly 4 decades ago, when we lived in fear of authorities and could not cast them off by voting against them. He says, we lived in fear of authorities and could not cast them off. Their decision was arbitrary and represented the will of a small minority of communists, backed up by the mighty power of the godless Soviet Empire. He says, I saw people in forced labor and concentration camps in communism who had opposed the system, and I personally knew many who died in them. Now, says this pastor, now I see concentration camps being built and activated right here in America during the last few years. It is no longer a secret, he writes. The horrors of Stalin's tortuous death camps of Siberia are now transplanted onto American soil for those who are to be categorized, identified, or classified as dissenters or reactionaries against the soon-coming New World Order. He writes, this is not an opinion or a wild exaggeration.
So what in the world is going on? When we look at these trucks hauling mobile prison systems around the country, should we be a little concerned, folks? It takes 4 semi-loads to make 1 prison cell unit. There are 444 loads going to Houston, Texas, 444 loads of these design units going to Walterboro, South Carolina, and 888 going to Rikers Island, New York. Those are the 3 that we've discovered so far. Why? What is going on in our country?
Well, the other questions are that we get all the time is how would they ever go about really pulling the plug on America? What would be the final steps that they would have to do? Well, one thing, as we mentioned, they're doing the paper war on us. They're passing bills and slowly, progressively putting everything in line. They will be doing the national identification card. They will have completed almost everything necessary. Now, more than likely, the most likely situation that's going to develop is that we will have what will probably be some type of and I will use what their quote will be, it'll be an international terrorist act of some sort. We will very likely see a artificially perpetrated a bombing of a city, a big bomb, or the poisoning of water systems, or some outrageous act that will be blamed on international terrorists. Now, what they will do at that point in time is formally declare a national emergency. We will get one of these fellow American speeches from Bill Clinton. They will then declare martial law to go along with that. And as if you see from, as you can see now with this paperwork that you see in front of you right now, this is in fact a bill that was passed, excuse me, not a bill that was passed, it was an executive order that was created by Bill Clinton and signed in last year, '94. This bill is the entire necessary paperwork for martial law in the United States of America. They get to confiscate property, confiscate even your bandages, your tractors. They get to take complete control of all resources, food delivery, goods, materials that could even be converted into food, and it even specifies that if it can be eaten by an animal, they can take it. It also shows total control of all water, of course, water, power, and all food systems at all. This is, in fact, all the paperwork necessary. I wanted you to be brought up and realize, be brought up to speed, if you will, and to realize when folks say they can't imagine that the government would do this, they come forward now and tell us that they were doing secret radiation tests on thousands of people 10, 20, 40 years ago. And we accept that. And they say, well, gee, sorry about that. We did this. We didn't tell folks. We gave little children this. We did this to adults. We did these. They did gas experiments. I want to show you a few little bits of some footage relative to some secret experiments that they were carrying on then that they now come forward and admit, and we, of course, accept it. But when you tell people that they're doing things right now that are totally bizarre, totally un-American, completely unconstitutional in nature, and moving us into this one-world government within the next 5 years, when they plan to have it done by the year 2000, people still find that hard to believe. Do you have to have it done to you so you can look back in retrospect 10 years from now, in the year 2010 or 2005, and look back and say, oh, look, this was when they started to do what they've done to us now, including full monitoring, your ID cards, confiscation of property, total socialism in the United States? Do you have to look back at it 10, 15 years now, from now, and look back at it and say, gee, they were right remember when we saw that videotape and a guy was talking about all these activities and we didn't pay attention to it? Today is the day to become activated.
Praise God for you, folks. You are sending the ripples out across America. And I want to tell you, you are called by this government, this sub rosa government that has control of our republic, that we must throw off. You are listed as public enemy #1. You are worse than the rapist and the robber and those that would commit crimes against the American people from high office. You are worse than that to this government that has grasped our republic, this foreign entity that had grasped our wonderful land. And I say to you, I hope and pray that you will never stop being an enemy of this damnable system that is crushing our lives and our posterity's lives. And the last thing I'm saying to you is this. Don't be in fear. The government should be in fear. We should not be in fear. We are right. You can stand up. They are wrong. Do not let them see you in fear. God is ashamed when we cow to this government. God is ashamed when we bow to evil. God is ashamed of us, and we will be punished with the rest if we bow to this evil. So I ask you this, folks. I have asked my government, the government that is control of my beloved republic, those people in power, that I demand of them that I be placed on the highest list, at the highest position on every list of those that stands against this subversive tyranny that has taken over America. I demand to be at the top of every list, and I want you to join me. We will not be afraid. We cannot be afraid and accomplish what we need to accomplish to save our nation. I get letters every day from some of you saying, don't put me on your list, Jack, please. I'll help you, but please. And from police officers that say, Jack, I'm afraid. Is there any way I can get some of your material? I just don't want them to know. And I say, folks, it's too late for that. It's too late for that. We have months left, folks. We have months left. And we can do so much in those months because we're working on a geometric progression. As you go from here, if every one of you take one piece of material and hand it to somebody else, in a geometric progression, you're going to cause ripples across America just from the people in this room. We can do it. And it's our mission, and it is our challenge, yes, but it is also a direction from our Lord and Heavenly Father. God bless all of you. Thank you so much.
Jordan Maxwell, what can you say? 35 years of research. Jordan, in conclusion.
I would like to say that all we need to do is do what we've been doing in this country, and all the conspirators have to do is do what they've been doing, and their timetable for taking us over very soon will be concluded.
Bottom line, now you're a Christian, you've got an answer for those who happen to be considering becoming a Christian or who are already so inclined.
Right. I think we need to share this with people. Number one, you should be spiritually prepared. You should take sides. You should take sides with the real God, not the false God of the New World Order. So please accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. If you hadn't ever thought about it, do so immediately. Open the Bible and accept Jesus as your Savior. Secondly, get prepared financially for the New World Order by getting some gold and silver. And also, there's going to be a food shortage. Store some food and get your mind set in the combat mode, because we're about to go into the worst time the world has ever known.
Maybe we should order some, include some lead with the gold and silver.
Let me very quickly give you a couple of ideas of things you need to do to start doing to protect yourself. Okay, you need to develop a mindset of survival. We need to start thinking like people in Nazi Germany and occupied Russia did. We need to start thinking like people who were persecuted in the underground church in Russia over the last 50 or 60 years and who are being persecuted today in Red China. We need to begin to develop this kind of a mindset. And it may not be fun, but I think it's called survival. Find like-minded people. You need to begin to form groups of like-minded people for mutual support, whether it's prayer support, financial, physical support, or whatever. Find alternate methods of doing everything. Develop an instinct for what doesn't feel right. Begin to eliminate non-essentials from your life. Develop a physical, mental, and spiritual disciplines. Okay, learn to treat everything as if it is irreplaceable. Buy things that cost, that will last even if they cost more. I've had my newsletter, and it's been a financial, political, geopolitical newsletter for years, but I'm beginning to write more and more about survival type things because I think that that's what we're moving into. I think that we need to develop a situation where we're a little less dependent on the system. Avoid S&L deposits. A lot more S&Ls are going to hit the wall. I would avoid the stock market unless you're a short-term speculator. It is the most overpriced stock market in U.S. financial history. It is being hyped and manipulated. It's not for real, and you don't want to be in it. I would avoid corporate bonds. I would actually avoid government bonds. Our government's finances are headed for the wall. I would say 30% of a portfolio should be in precious metals. I had a couple things here. Let me just give you a couple things here really quick. Jimmy Clinton is setting the stage for a new bull market in gold and silver. U.S. stock market is the most overvalued market in the world today, but gold and silver are the most undervalued. Require 1 year's supply of survival food. I think it's very important. I talked to a young man here who has been a subscriber of mine for some time, and he said that he had taken my advice and done that. He lost his job over the last year and was able to feed his family for a number of months until he was able to find new work. The powers that be have sold our food surpluses down to 30 to 40 days here in the United States, 30 to 40 days. If you want to subscribe to my newsletter, there is a card back there. There's not enough of them. I just didn't know I was going to have this big a crowd. But it's written, it analyzes global monetary, economic, and geopolitical developments. It does it from a biblical and a conservative perspective. I do have a very heavy intelligence background and great contacts all over the world. It is God's mission for me, I believe. Okay, so develop some alternate sources of information, hardcore sources that are reliable. Simplify your lifestyle. I would say consider living in the country or a country retreat if you could. Big U.S. cities are going to go through convulsions in the 1990s, I truly believe. My family, we homeschool. We're learning a lot of different skills, hunting, backpacking, camping, fishing. We've gotten into herbal medicine. Because what they're going to do to the medical system in this country is going to be absolutely ghastly. And so we're trying as a family, and we're trying to counsel people who get my newsletter to try to become more self-sufficient and less dependent on the system. Now, whatever that means to you, just give some thought and a prayer to it. Pray for wisdom and guidance on how to handle your finances, your family, your life. How then shall we live in the days that come ahead? We literally are seeing the foundations crumble. I have a lot of flack. I get a lot of flack from the same kind of people that Jim Dobson says are giving him flack about you shouldn't be worried about these things. Trust God, pray, and do nothing. Boy, I don't agree with that. It does say in Proverbs 27:12, the prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and suffer for it. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in a spiritual battle. This is a spiritual battle, and it will be won or lost on this plane. Now, you don't hear me saying do nothing. I think the message of the Bible, to me, is very simple. It's twofold. We take an active stand for Jesus Christ, if necessary, as unto death. And I think that you will have people in this room that in the next 5 to 10 years could be martyred for the cause of Jesus Christ. I believe that will come to America. But the second thing I think we're supposed to do, at least as I interpret the Bible, is we are to take an active stand against evil. Okay, and that's what I don't see Christians doing. I do see some Christians who are actively out witnessing and sharing the gospel of Christ. I don't see many Christians. There are some, and I think there are a lot in this room. I don't see many Christians, though, taking an active stand against evil, and I think it's high time we do, because I think God's going to judge America. So shortly after I got out of the university, I came to know the Lord Jesus Christ as my personal Savior. I became a Christian, and all of a sudden, that which had depressed me no longer depressed me. It exhilarated me. It excited me. Hey, this is incredible. What a battle, and so forth. But I could it was like the rest of the pieces of the puzzle fit together. I would encourage you, if you're a pro-lifer or whoever or whatever you are, that first and foremost, where are you with the Lord? Where are you with the Lord Jesus Christ? We are going into the biggest battle for freedom, the biggest battle against our Constitution, our Bible, and our traditional values in the history of the United States, perhaps in the history of the world, but certainly in the history of the United States. I don't think we can win this battle without the Lord. I don't think we can win it without His help, His wisdom, His guidance, His strength, His discernment. The good news is God is still in control. He's in control of nations. He's in control of history. He's in control of our individual lives. And as it says in Ezekiel 22, He was about to judge Israel, and He said He was looking for a few people to stand in the gap. And He couldn't find anybody to stand in the gap, and so He went ahead and He judged Israel. I think He's looking for a few good people in this country to stand in the gap, and I think there's a remnant of believers who believe in the traditional values and the Constitution and the Bible and the Lord Jesus Christ, who I think really will take a stand. And I think it's just for a time such as this that many of us have been called onto the scene. I have people say, well, doesn't it bother you? You've got 4 children. 3 of them are still at home. I homeschool them. Doesn't it bother you to have children and raise them in this time? No, 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 not at all. This is the most exciting time in the world to raise kids. It's a great time to raise kids. I'm going to raise my kids to be freedom fighters. I'm going to raise my kids to believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. I'm going to raise them to take a stand. And if they die for what's right someday, you know, that's okay, because the Bible says absent from the body and face to face with the Lord. These are the most exciting times. These are a time when there are so few people that are doing what's right and taking a stand for what's right. And if you want to be one of those people, you can make an incredible amount of difference. You can just make an incredible difference with your life. And it seems like the powers that are around us are so powerful. You look at the Clintons, you look at the government, you look at the mendacity and the evil and the wickedness in the media and across the country, and it seems like we're surrounded and outnumbered by the bad guys. Do you remember what happened to Elijah? Elijah was surrounded by, I don't know, was it Ahab? It was somebody's army that wanted to take him out. And his servant said, aren't you worried? Aren't you concerned? Don't you see that we are massively overwhelmed? And Elijah saw it a little bit different. He finally prayed that God would open his servant's eyes and that the servant would see what he saw, which is that they were surrounded by thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of angels who greatly outnumbered the bad guys. And finally, the servant's eyes were opened, and he saw that. Look, God's on our side. He's going to allow this country to go into some very, very difficult times, and I've tried to give you some perspective tonight on those times. But God's not going to lose. He is more powerful than the forces of darkness. He's more powerful than Satan. He's just looking for a few people who are willing to stand in the gap and kind of lay it all on the line. I think a lot of those kinds of people are in this room tonight. I am really proud and humbled and honored to have been able to address you tonight. I hope some of these things will be food for thought. With God on our side, we're going to win, so keep up the good work. Thank you, and God bless you. Thank you.
So I'm telling you folks, the time to wake up is now. Wake up, America, before it's too late. Before you lose your God-given rights to some foreign potentate who might think that you look like a sucker. Now, those of you who have been in militia groups and everybody's getting all panicky, let's understand a few things about the militia. Now, the bottom line here, folks, is a lot of people are all upset about the militia. All the militia is concerned citizens that are worried about their Constitution getting flushed down the toilet. We're not putting up with that stuff. We want people to understand that we love the Constitution, we love our country, and we're not screwing around. Now, if they're going to invade us, they're going to change our money, they're going to shut down our Constitution. That's why the militia needs to be organized. That's why you need to be down there talking to a militia. That's why you need to be joining the militia. I don't care what church you go to. I don't care what color, national origin, ethnic background you come from. You need to be down to the militia, and you need to be talking to them folks about this is the United States of America, and I will protect it and its constitutional form of government. And by doing that, if we do it in sufficient numbers, most probably what will happen is the New World Order scammers will realize, the people woke up, we screwed up. We'll have to wait another 300 years to try and pull it again. And let's hope that's what happens. If that isn't what happens, then the militia will defend the Republic, just like what our forefathers intended. And we will defend the Republic, as we always do, with vigor. And we will have a government by Constitution. That American flag will be on that pole out there, and anybody that wants to try something different, hey, knock yourself out. But plan on a very severe battle, because we will never give up the United States of America, its constitutional government, or our American flag, or our American heritage. So this idea that you're going to wear us out, tie us down, otherwise skew us around is nothing but a lot of hoodoo. It ain't going to happen in your lifetime. As a matter of fact, your lifetime may not be that long either. Because we try traitors in this country. And the bottom line is the penalty for treason is death. And it's not our purpose to threaten or coerce or otherwise intimidate any person, but we want you to understand that this is the United States of America. This is a country governed by constitutional law, that constitutional law prescribes penalties for criminal acts, and that those criminal acts can be punished by a lawful means. We're asking all persons that are involved in all walks of government or there any areas of the law to please, 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 let's get back to the Constitution and quit screwing around. We're asking you, please, before God, we're asking you. We want our Constitution, we want it back, we want all of the American principles that we stand for, that our brave soldiers died for. And we're asking you to please quit screwing around. Let's get down to brass tacks. You've been feeding the pablum to the babies too long. We're way, believe me, we're way ahead of you. You may not think so, but I'm here to tell you, we're way ahead of you. You're going to wake up someday and you're going to be shocked. We're going to be all standing out there smiling. Because you're going to be the one that's asleep, not us. We know what we're talking about. We're not fooling around. We want you to honor our Constitution.
They now feel, and rightly so, that we are either so blasted stupid or so lazy or so wrapped up in beer and pretzels and sports that we are not going to lift a finger to their actions. And I will agree with this, something that most of you do not seem to understand, but I want to remind you of it. When the time comes, out of the 70 million firearms owners that exist, 6 out of 7 at least will hand their weapons over immediately. Immediately. As long as you hold no illusion to that, you'll be doing just fine. That's reality. But let me remind you of numbers using the old world math again. 70 million firearms owners minimum, with 60 million surrendering their arms, means 10 million well-armed combatants. Now, I hate to tell you, kids, but that's just like facing 300,000 screaming naked Chinamen. Worse, because we think a little better, we fight a little better, we're a hell of a lot better equipped. I pity the fools. I really do. I really do.
Well, we're going to talk about something that is quite surprising. It is the citizen militia's rise in state, and it's talking about Michigan. Norman Olson swears in new members of the Northern Michigan Regional Militia at a Sheboygan County training session. Now, you want to say something about this picture, don't you?
Our local ABC station featured this the last 2 nights. These men, militiamen, are now in 65 of our 83 counties seeking recruits, and they're joining. We're told by ABC that they could be radicals, but relevance researchers, which fed me a lot of this information, said these are good people, religious people. They are not skinheads, not neo-Nazis, not Klansmen, not white supremacists, but people who care about the Constitution of the United States and their country.
Guy, I've made a couple of trips up north. I've spent many hours with these men and women, and I can say that they're not white supremacists, although some of those people may be drawn to the group. They are not survivalists, although they received that kind of training. They claim they are defenders of the Constitution who will lay down their lives for your rights, including the right to bear arms. They believe without weapons, there is no way to keep the tyrants, as they like to call them, or our government in check. Now, keep in mind what you're about to see is not the Army, it's not the National Guard. This is a citizens militia, armed and ready to fight our government. There we go. Deep in the woods, not far from the resort town of Harbor Springs, gunfire pierces the cool fall air. It's the sound of a Chinese-made SKS assault rifle, the sound of the Northern Michigan militia.
I think we're on a slippery slope leading to civil war.
Actually, we have a Constitution that was given to us by our founding fathers. I'm willing to die for that. I'm willing to die for Christ, too.
Dennis, you copy? I would say the militia is very well armed. How well armed is America?
They're armed, but they won't say how many weapons they have. and they're preparing for battle with a government they claim is out of control. Their evidence?
I think it can pretty well be summed up in 4 little letters, WACO.
The tragedy at the Branch Davidian compound in Texas.
What really happened there was the destruction of a church under the United States flag in the color of law.
When our own Army and Navy decides to stand against the Constitution of the United States of America, we'll call on a higher court.
Who are these so-called freedom fighters who can quote the early American patriot Patrick Henry as quickly as they quote the scriptures? They are a patch quilt of rural gun owners.
This rifle built in 1912. These are just fine old firearms.
Military veterans and patriots disenchanted with the political system.
We call our legislators and they don't listen. They go ahead and do what they want to do. We vote, but it doesn't seem to make a difference.
The militia claims it has soldiers in 65 of 83 Michigan counties. The day we visited, they signed up 9 new recruits.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to
the Second Amendment is near and dear to the hearts of many militia members. They point to the passage of the crime bill as evidence that our rights are being trampled on.
The military has a weapon. They're called defensive weapons. But if the civilians have that same weapon, they're called what? Assault weapons. Why? Why? Somebody tell me why.
They are trying to stop us either legislatively or they are trying to stop us in a strategic engagement.
Norm Olson is the state commander of the Northern Michigan Militia. He's a 22-year veteran of the Air Force who opened up a gun shop in Alanson last year.
The militia headquarters in Malville.
Many militia members buy their weapons here. Olson is also the minister of the Calvary Baptist Church in Brutus.
You need to get one of these if you don't have one.
Olson mixes religion with politics by starting each sermon with an update on the militia. Whether Olson is preaching the gospel or guns, his message attracts militia members to his church. Commander Ray Southwell is a deacon here. Southwell took us to the woods near his home where the militia first formed last April.
Because at that time, again, there's a tremendous amount of fear being involved in a militia, even though we're not doing anything unlawful.
Southwell put his home in his wife's name and discarded his worldly possessions, preparing for the end.
I foresee, and this is a scenario that I picture, within 2 years, there'll be an economic collapse or hyperinflation.
Unless there is a immediate turnaround for our country, spiritually, morally, in law, there will be conflict. It's inevitable.
Last weekend, Target 7 went into the brush with the Northern Michigan Militia. Today, it's a search and rescue mission. A young boy is lost.
We want to transport him over this fence. Drop that fence down. Drop it on.
But if you think these secret soldiers are a Northern Michigan phenomena, guess again.
This is a voicemail system here.
Using computers, fax machines, and video equipment, the militia keeps in touch with its soldiers in 65 counties, including the Metro Detroit area.
You know, there are some people that are going to listen to this and they're going to say, these guys are dangerous. These guys are nuts. And what would you say to them?
We're not. We're Americans. I mean, we're regular working people. It doesn't get any simpler than this. Don't tread on me.
Militia leaders emphasize they will only strike in defense, but they are vague about at what point the militia would fight back. If you think the militia movement is only gaining momentum in northern Michigan, watch tomorrow night. These secret soldiers are closer than you think.
We should point out that there's nothing against the law here. This is constitutionally protected, but obviously they're preparing for this strategic engagement. Or what circumstances would they launch it? You know?
When would they send out an alert?
They send out alerts on a daily basis about various things that happen throughout the state. And they're rather vague about at what point they would actually take up arms and go defend someone. They say if a Waco-like incident occurred again, they would be there, and they would fight.
It's interesting. Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you, Shelley.
We now have J.J. Johnson from the Ohio Militia. Hello. How's everyone doing? Okay. You okay here? The reason I brought John Truckman's wife, Carol, out here with me is because their family is very good friends with my family. And I'm really getting tired of people in the press calling me a Klan member, calling me a neo-Nazi, and calling me a white supremacist. Thank you. And as long as we're at it, can I speak a minute on this angry white male syndrome thing that's going on around here? And this, now press, take a note of something here, because I'm going to give you some sound bites today, okay? The fact that you assumed that a black man cannot stand up for his constitutional rights, I find rude, crude, absurd, and yes, a bit racist. Okay, what I'm going to try to do in a few minutes I got here is tell you about what the militia is. After you've seen all the stuff in the press, there's been a little bit of redefining about what's going on. But first, let me tell you about what happened earlier this week. President Clinton went to Billings, Montana. That was a militia stronghold. Everybody doing okay out there? And what he wanted to do, he told people that if these people out here, these so-called paramilitary people, said something that you didn't agree with, you were to hold your fist up in the air and shout no. So Bill Clinton, the militia is here to return the favor. You guys ready? Yeah! Let me ask you guys a question. Are you going to give up your guns? No! Never. Never. Are you going to allow this nation to be turned into a bunch of slaves? No! And are you going to give up this Constitution without a fight? No! Okay. I hope that message got clear over to those concrete barricades over there, because I want them to know, oh, we don't play. Let me tell you who we are and who we're not. If you've been reading a lot about this in the press, you've been getting it confused. This movement is not about skin color. It is not about just guns. This is the civil rights movement of the 90s. Yeah. Under Title 10, USC 311, groups around the nation formed themselves as a constitutional safety net for their own self-defense and self-preservation. Okay, that's who we are. It's called a militia. All it is what the groups formed themselves under. Now, we're not going anywhere. Another question that's been happening in the press is they're like, what's our agenda? Who gives the orders? What are you guys all about? Well, I'm going to tell you now. You guys wanted your sound bites, here they come. You want to know what our real objectives are? Well, I'm going to give you the standing order of the militia. Since they're trying to shove more unconstitutional legislation down our throat, and the events of a warrantless house-to-house searches and seizures continue, this is now the standing order. The line of demarcation has been drawn at the front door. Right, yeah. Any unconstitutional attempts of forceful entry will be met with equal and opposite force. And I don't agree with G. Gordon Liddy. He said aim for the head of the groin. I feel with the right kind of ammunition, I don't care where you hit them. Okay, as each piece of unconstitutional liberty-taking legislation gets pumped out from around here, that line of demarcation will move out a little bit further. Right. And it will continue even if it has to surround the borders of this city. Okay? And let me say something very clear, and I want this message to go right to Congress and right to President Clinton. You've been watching what those Serbs are doing with those UN troops? Yeah! Yeah! Okay. Bring them out! Where do you get them over here, buddy? Bring them out! Because we don't chain them to targets, they will become targets. Okay? I mean that very sincerely. You do not use foreign nationals to enforce laws in this country. That's what started this country. There'll never be another foreign soldier in this zone order. So now you know who we are and who we're about. The True Rainbow Coalition has been formed across America in this movement. There's been a lot of questions I've got from black people about, why should I join? I've heard all about you guys. For any black person out there listening, take this message and burn it in your brain. If our ancestors would have been armed, they would not have been slaves. I do not plan on being a slave. And I am not afraid of death because I am doing this for my children, my grandchildren, and those generations that I don't even know yet. There's something else I want to say to all the black people out here. That people have been running around telling you that you shouldn't even worry about the Constitution because it doesn't apply to you because you're only considered 3/5 of a person. Well, let me tell you that I'm a full person here, and in the words of John Lakin, who stood down 500 troops in Brunswick, Ohio, I was born a free man, and I plan on dying a free man. Don't you let anybody tell you you can't stand up for your constitutional rights. Don't you let anybody tell you you don't have the right to defend yourself. Because remember something, no matter what they tell you, no matter what color you are, black, white, yellow, Jew, Gentile, Republican, Democrat, we don't care. Because the truth is that you have inalienable rights. And we are all God's people. And as God's people, we will stand on our own 2 feet and we will crawl before no one. Thank you, and God bless the Republic.
As you can see here, I'm going to put up a picture of the Chechnyan Patriots, the Chechnyan militia. And if you think this little group of Chechnyan Patriots fighting for their own individual liberties, you think they've caused a lot of trouble for the Russians, which they have, wait till the New World Order challenges patriotic Americans on our own ground. It's going to make the Chechnyan resistance look like a practice event at the Boy Scouts. We are not cultivating any kind of an uprising, but be warned, the United Nations, one world government, will not take the United States of America. They will not take the American patriots, and you better watch out because we're not going to put up with it any longer. Thank you. The militia of Montana, which is pursuing for the most part the assistance across the country to assist and help the creation of patriot groups and militia groups. Militia of Montana is now moving in such an expanded growth that it's almost impossible to handle it. The militia presently sends out probably something in the neighborhood of 40 packages a day to people across the country that are in fact trying to put together a militia group or a patriot group of their own. We will have another separate presentation that is available. We have presently over 40 videos and 40 books and pamphlets that are available.
Well, as we say, it's 7th of July, 1994, one day closer to victory here in the occupied states. Brought to you by the Little Brother Information Network. Big Brother is watching and Little Brother has a big mouth. That's our unit motto. We've been traveling all over the country, busy to the point where we do kind of lose track of days. Since last you probably heard us, we've been in the Dakotas, Montana, Texas, Florida. We've been into the East Coast. We've been up north to our own state of Michigan, meeting with a lot of our new regimental strength militia units which are organized. I don't know, I might have a sample of one of the news articles. They actually covered it in the news. Now, needless to say, it was derogatory, okay, to a certain extent. But they couldn't deny it because what's happening up in the upper parts of Michigan, for instance, around Petoskey, Brutus, near Traverse City, is the 1st Wolverine Regiment, which is overt organized, has been meeting on the village green. They meet in the town parks, they get permission, the mayors are backing this up. The county is not giving them any problem. The sheriffs have been told and have explained exactly what their intentions are. They're meeting on a regular basis. New units are being formed virtually every week. And you are a local militia. Remember, you may project your strength eventually down the road, but your first concern is this piece of real estate. We've been very happy with the way things have organized. In Florida, the regimental strength units are now number 27, and their regiments are different, are organized larger than ours. In Montana, everybody knows and has seen a lot of what Mom's done. They're very successful. They're branching out to the other states. There's a new tri-state operation taking place separate from that, which is going to include virtually, I'd say, tens of thousands of personnel by the time it's done. Florida militias are in contact with virtually everybody that we know of so far. Georgia has expanded and is presently moving very quickly. I don't know how many of you heard about this. This was in Gun Week 2 weeks ago, but we had confirmation on this the week before. 3 counties in the panhandle of Florida have passed overt militia laws. In other words, the counties will create militias of their own. There are 5 other counties that are in process, so we think we'll have 1/4 of the state of Florida within the next few weeks. In other words, 8 counties will have militia laws, whereby the county will directly support the militias in whatever way is necessary. They're also looking at a posse comitatus law. For the county, that already exists, but what they're going to do is implement it. What that means is that every able-bodied man will be part of the posse, and if need be, can be called forward to participate with the county to protect against the Fed if the Fed attempts to confiscate the arms. Excellent. Two sheriffs have already announced that they will refuse in every way, shape, or form to allow the Fed in to attempt confiscation of arms, period. So we've got good men and women out there. What they expect or what they need to do is what we told everybody. It worked exceptionally well. I'm really happy with this. That's really why we did the tapes. Okay, we were involved with this covertly long before we were involved with it overtly. What we saw, and I think all you can see this, is that you've got a lot of good military people out there who took an oath, but they do not know who to turn to. They cannot trust their management because their management has betrayed them, and they know this. They think they're alone. They think they're alone. That's the most common thing that I've heard. I've heard this time and time and time again. I've had men cry because, in fact, they talked for 2 hours to us, where they come forward and say, I did not believe the American people had any idea what was going on. That's now changed.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, as we settle in for the final speaker of the evening, more people across America think they know more about our featured speaker than is true. Through the demonization of mainstream media, he was known by television viewers last week as the second most wanted man in America. You saw it. ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN. He was the poster boy for the militia. Even when law enforcement finally announced he was not wanted in connection with the Oklahoma City bombing. Those of you who have been following the program, The Intelligence Report, on shortwave radio, also know an associate of our featured speaker tonight who's going to speak to you ever so briefly before we introduce you to the man from Michigan. Ladies and gentlemen, the co-author of The Intelligence Report, Mr. John Stadtmiller.
We ran a little bit long, so I'm going to make this real brief. As Mr. Portner said, that there's been a lot of disinformation about a man by the name of Mark Hornke from Michigan. And I'm here to set the record straight. On the Intelligence Report, of which the show that I co-hosted, we are at war right now as far as I'm concerned. This is the first casualty of war. We are off the air. Now, I've got to ask you a question. Why were we pulled? How many people in this audience heard the Intelligence Report? How many of you people here ever heard us espouse hate, espouse anti-Semitism, anti-black, anti-anything? I don't think one of you here can say that we have. Well, there are still talk radio programs out there, but I'm wondering how long those shows are going to last. How long are we going to have free speech? There's a man here, I'm not going to take up any more of your time because the keynote speaker is here. His name is Mark Kornke. Let me tell you a little bit about this guy. And also for the media that is here today, please get this straight this time. He did a radio program 5 nights a week. Every weekend we were in a different city giving talks to people like you. And I got to tell you, he's probably one of the finest people I've ever met. In a couple of minutes, you're going to hear the evil godfather of hate. Person that's been doing a lot for the cause of liberty and freedom. And I think it's important. And I appreciate all you people showing up here today. Thank you.
Join me now, ladies and gentlemen, as we individually make up our own minds about who he is or what he represents and what he has to say. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark from Michigan, Mr. Mark Kornke.
First of all, this is a test for all of our friends and brothers and sisters in California. Good afternoon. Every time I've been here, for many of you men and women, thank you. You have been some of the finest hosts that we've seen in the nation. So I appreciate you a great deal. Ladies and gentlemen, I have never seen, over the last 12 days, so many barefaced, outright, rotten lies in my life, and the media was responsible for it all. I think a better way to vote is to do this. Do not buy their papers, shut off their programs, sell the cable station. And that will work because, as you know, just as we did with the intelligence report, I challenge you to do this. Do not cower. These knees buckle for no man on earth. Stand proudly as Americans. Look another man and woman in the eye and tell them exactly what you have seen and what you have witnessed. Go beyond all of the controls and the mechanisms that are there. You demonstrate your strength. I have had the blessings, along with John, that few people have had in the last 2 years. I have seen the American people, black, white, Asian, and that mongering about us being supremacists or racist. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm part American and Indian myself. When I hear this filth and this crap, coming out of these people's mouths, the bottom line is this, that you are going to be the test of the mettle of America. You, not me. Time and again I have challenged you. If I fall, who will pick up the flag? I ask you here now, if I fall, and it is very likely it will happen, for there's only one other step left if this does not succeed with the smear in the media, who here in this room will pick up the flag of liberty if I fall? And ladies and gentlemen, one way or another, the Republic will be safe, as I have said 1,000 times. My concern is also for every one of you individually. I do not care who you are, and you've known this for a fact. How many homes have we come to? How many cities have we visited? Not even the federal government believed it. I watched their face fall because they could not understand and they cannot comprehend the commitment that we have to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights for all men and women in this country. The fact of the matter is this, that we are so close to a storm that is great and terrible, and yet perhaps necessary, that this was a last gasp, as many other actions that I'm going to talk about here tonight, a last gasp to try and push away freedom, liberty, and in fact the truth, which is coming to bear across the nation, and there is nothing that can be done to stop it because now Americans are learning to talk to each other. That was the fear of the intelligence report as much as anything else, and you notice I talk about it in past tense, but it's not dead. Many of you know the techniques and the technology that we've employed, and much of it is not identifiable, and you will continue to go full force forward with focus, with your eyes on the objective. which is to preserve the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And you know that I've sworn, if need be, to fight to protect it. And I will not back down from that ever. I asked many times of this, and you've heard it read on the air, but there's a reason, because it is so crucial now. All the material goods that we have, ladies and gentlemen, will mean nothing if chains are laid upon our ankles and upon our wrists and we become slaves in our own home. Many years ago, people said, I heard it myself when I was this small, when I was much younger, I'll fight when they get to the borders. Oh yeah, and then when they got to the borders, I'll fight when they get to the state. And I'll fight when they get to the county. And boy, when they show up in my town, we'll be there to stand up to them and push them right back out. And then, of course, it was to the front border of the property. Then it was to the front door. And finally, now what most people have decided to say, and I won't say all, but a lot is, well, as long as you leave me the beer and the television, you can have everything else, including the kids. The beer is running out, ladies and gentlemen. Bottom line is this, and you've seen it in California, but it's throughout the nation. When somebody said, what do I fear? Ask me this, what do I fear? I fear nothing now. You can get to a point where once you realize what your enemy stands for, fear has no part of this equation. It cannot. If eventually I fall, one of you will pick up the flag, because all of you have the same spirit, the same heart that every man and woman that I've seen here today has. You just have to realize and understand how to touch it and find it. The Constitution is our property, ours, not the government's, not to be manipulated. Not by a president, not by Congress, not by the House, not even by the judiciary, if it violates the body of the law. And you're the final decision. You make the final choice, freedom or slavery. And many of the people and creatures that we face, and that's the only term I can use for some of the butchers that we have seen, that these creatures, given the opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, will work with reckless abandon if the chains are not kept in place. For all of you, I care not where you come from the inner city. Many of you know we've gone to the cities and we've gone to the country. We've been to 44 of the 50 states of the Union in less than a year. Do you realize how much traveling that is? We have exhausted ourselves intentionally, both of us, and many more who have traveled with us intentionally, because we knew that time was crucial. And the hopes that planting a seed, that every one of you, I do not care where you come from, but every one of you would then turn to another man and woman and challenge to stand up and ask, do I wish to be free? That's the choice. Are you a free man or woman? Pity the poor, wretched, timid soul who is too faint-hearted to resist his oppressors. He has the intellect of a slave. He sings the song of the damned. I can't fight. I have too much to lose. I own too much property. I have worked too hard to get what I have. They will put me out of my business if I resist. I will go to jail. Yeah, well, congratulations. We all will anyway. I have my family to think about. Well, we all have families to think about. Even if we are alone, this is our family here, ladies and gentlemen. Because, ladies and gentlemen, do not despair. Trust me on this, with all that we know, do you not think I have had the opportunity time and again to despair? For what you see is but this much, and what we get to see is the rest of the picture. We have many different variations on the theme of what we call an American, but there is one common trait that we have said, from Louisiana to Connecticut, from California, yes, to the Rocky Mountains, and to our brothers and sisters across the ocean, to our friends to the north and our many friends to the south, and that is this: we have a common bond. We want freedom and liberty, but we want it with our sovereignty intact. The best weapon that we have had is word of mouth, because the press lies. I know for a fact, because I can demonstrate to you, and I will give you the best example, I was the second most wanted man in the United States, wasn't I? Yeah. Thank you. Well, that was continued along with many other bits of information for how many days? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I know for a fact, because we were in contact with law enforcement, all during that time. In fact, I sat there when some of the calls came in to the county sheriff's department and many others, because I wanted to know, if there's a problem, I don't want to see people killed. because I know the feelings of many Americans out there. Do you want to talk to me? And they said, no, nobody has the interest, but the press certainly does, and they are lying through their teeth. And that was the sheriff's deputies themselves. They said, one good thing is this. For the days that they lied, they kept calling into the sheriff's department, and every time you call the sheriff, it is tape recorded, ladies and gentlemen. We can document that for 3, 5, no, 8 straight days, they knew what they were doing. So then you have to ask yourself a basic question: who is behind this? Is it government per se? Well, I will warn you about something. We have had the blessings of traveling around the United States and meeting many men and women, and yes, some of them are in government, some of them are in the military, many men in uniform. Not all are bad. In fact, not the larger percentage, just the reverse. There are men and women that swore to protect and defend the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, just as many of you did when you were in uniform. And they are worried because you know what they say? They are willing to stand, they're willing to fight this tyranny if it attempts these actions that are being proposed, but it needs to have you next to them, not behind them, but next to them, because we must all stand side by side as Americans. One of the things that I can see now that we must fear more than anything else, if we are going to have any fear, is that someone's going to try and talk us out of that flag. That through the concept of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, they will create the problem, demonstrate the problem, and come up with a solution otherwise none of you would have accepted. Now I ask you to look around today especially. I've heard all the digs and all the snide remarks and all of the different comments that were made about what type of people make up an action of this type, like a constitutional meeting or a constitutional issue meeting or even a militia meeting. And we've been around the nation and we have met all people involved. Young and old, black and white, Asian and American Indian, ladies and gentlemen. We've had representatives in Denver from virtually all of the community and the American Indian tribes, and all with the same concern: we may become slaves. What do we do? Well, I'm going to ask you something today that I asked them to do, and it's the exact same thing that needs to be done around the country. You need to look next door right now. Look around you. Look at the people that are here. The ones that are listening even in the other room and are in the same situation. You're the solution. Not power from above. Don't expect a solution to trickle down from above, because that's where the corruption is right now. It is centered in Washington, and it is centered in several key mechanisms at this time that feel a window of opportunity is in place. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to stop them, yes or no? Yeah. That's what needs to be done. I see many young ones here, and ladies and gentlemen, how many times have we suggested this in the past? See, this is what they're afraid of, is what we're asking you to do is work together. But work together from the ground up. That's what scared the other side. That's why we're off the air, and there are real neo-Nazis out there that are on the air. Bottom line, anybody who listened to my program and John's program knows exactly what we were about and exactly what we were talking about. Fact of the matter is, the other characters are still online. What we were doing was factual, was timely, and was effective. And that's why we had to be demonized, because after the fact, ladies and gentlemen, we had to be squashed and crushed and pulverized. We saw bits and pieces of this all over the country. This entire operation was most assuredly orchestrated. And in fact, it was orchestrated not from just the government, though some people in the government were involved, but other people behind the scenes, behind the media. I ask you to lift that rock up and see where the bugs are right now. Find out who they are, ask who it is. When you see a report, especially what we've seen in the last 2 weeks, find out who's behind the person who wrote it. Then find out who owns the paper. And eventually you can draw the lines back to figure out who's who in the zoo and who was involved in this manipulation. And then again, as I said, why are you buying their papers? Why are you providing the enemy with resources? Why are you giving them money? From this point on, it should be word of mouth that anything that we can identify as opposition with regard to the media should be shunted. You have no need to talk to them, by the way, because what are you going to get from them other than editing? I could speak for 2 hours here and you'd see 5 words, and they'd have nothing to do, because they'd be out of context with what actually was talked about for the last how many hours here in this room. We're in a race. How many times have you heard me say this? We are in a race, and it is a close one, but we have just as much of a capability of winning as the other side. We have just as much of an opportunity, and ladies and gentlemen, to win, we need not be a whole lap ahead. We need only be 3 steps ahead. That's all. Winning means this: we're defending. First of all, there is nothing that the New World Order has that we want. There is nothing that we have asked to take from anybody. In fact, just the reverse. It is the demand of the New World Order crowd, the elitists, the globalists, whatever term you want to use, to take from this woman, to take from this man, to take from that gentleman back there. In fact, you've been fighting a purely defensive war for so long, you wouldn't know what the word offense meant. And that's a fact. You've been holding ground. But there is one good thing, remember, about any martial art that you should remember from history, too. The attacker must subdue and destroy. The defender need only survive. We hold this piece of real estate, ladies and gentlemen. We hold it as free men and women right now. If you wish to pass that legacy on to that young child that's in your arms back there, or to the young children that I've seen here in the audience today, then you better stand up now and show them what it is to be an American. You better be willing to demonstrate by example and not to hide. Most assuredly also to point out what it is you've got in the way of bugs under the rocks here with regard to the media and also government, because remember, many of those are hand in hand, foot in foot right now, and they were being manipulated one by the other. Pay attention to the faces, pay attention to the names, and remember them for the future. And again, make them unemployed, please. That's the best thing you can do. Myself, I have taught you many things. I hope one thing is patience, because eventually everything will be shown for what it is. And if there is somebody out there who truly feels that I am a racist, that I'm a separatist or a supremacist in any way, I want you to step forward right now, please. I want you to look me in the eye and tell me that. Because not one of these cowards would do that otherwise, other than with print edited or on a television screen 500,000 miles away. That's why. Because I'd reach in and probably pull out their tongue. Fact of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, I've served with many good men and women from all walks of life. I've had the advantage, as I said, of speaking to so many of you that it is an insult that the media has done what it has done, and you know it too. So stand up and tell people. You're good men and women. I know it for a fact. We trod a lot of miles. We flew a lot of planes. We put up with a lot of nonsense. We lost a lot of sleep. We've spent our lives away from our families because you're all part of our family. If you don't think it's important, then I beg you, I ask you now, please, if you won't do it for anybody else, do it for yourself, but stand up. They're going to get one shot at this one. This storm, and I've talked about this in the past, is now upon us, and the clouds are overhead, ladies and gentlemen. It is a terrible, dark storm indeed. I said this to a person on a plane while we were coming out here, a woman I talked to for 3+ hours. It was like giving a regular presentation. But what she asked was this. She goes, well, do you think that there's a way we can come up with a peaceable solution? And I told her, yes, I do, but I'll tell you something. What it means is that every person in this plane would have to get up off their dead rear end and actually use their vocal cords. It means that all of you and all of us must be participatory in government now. Not waiting for someone else like Mark or John or Frank or Fred or Bill to tell you to do it, ladies and gentlemen. This is the great renaissance of America, or it shall be the darkest years of American history, short of the American Revolution. Decided by you in your suits, by you in your leisure clothes, by you in your work clothes. It makes no difference. The juggernaut that we face, called the New World Order, is in motion, and it is a terrible creature indeed. It has no respect for our Constitution and Bill of Rights. And I keep referring to that, and I've noticed the press and their attitude, which is very interesting, like, I believe in a literal interpretation of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Yes, I do. Thank you. That's why they can still have their cameras, still have their notepads, and we can still do what we're doing because of the First Amendment. But let me tell you a little story John didn't relate. A Pennsylvania editor he called up because he was tired of, he talked to for about 2 hours, and one of the first things the guy said is, show me where it says I have to respect and honor the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. This is a man in the press, and this is an attitude I've seen across the country because I've spoken to 3 separate people who said the exact same thing to me. Under the protection and guise of the First Amendment, they would assist in the destruction of the rest. Washington, Franklin, Jefferson, and virtually all of the other founding fathers warned of this, and so many other perspectives that we must worry about and we have to pay attention to. And you, ladies and gentlemen, are the final watchdogs. And yes, if need be, you had better be armed, because eventually this Byzantine corruption will continue to such a level that this nation will be unrecognizable from what was originally established. Most people wonder, well, how is it we survived this long? And how is it that we got along, and myself included, John and myself, with what we were doing here? Ladies and gentlemen, we did it at the personal level. We didn't go looking for any big machinery or any big corporation. We did it at the personal level to virtually millions of you. There are many of you know that we are not concerned for our own personal safety so much as the fact that you are informed. We have tread miles and miles again for that purpose. Well, you're going to have to do it now too. At some point in time, we're going to be stopped here because there's only one other thing they can do to silence my mouth. And I will not shut up. And I refuse to shut up. In fact, how dare I, as Bill Clinton said, I'll dare to do it any time I want. And somebody said, oh, Mark, we got to tone it down. Why should we tone it down? Since obviously if they win, they're going to get the whole ball of wax. If the other side wins, ladies and gentlemen, notepads you hold in your hand aren't going to be worth the powder it takes to blow away. For you don't need 60 reporters when there's only one world government. You don't need 60 microphones, you need but one. Big Brother is not fascism. Big Brother is not communism. Big Brother is socialism, stretching on for as far as the mind can see. Imagine, if you will, a boot on the face of humanity forever. George Orwell. I still will say this. If this track continues, we will probably have to fight. But I'm also, as I said, a realist, ladies and gentlemen, and we will do everything in our power, and you are obligated as Christians, as whatever you are, by the way, Jewish, Muslim, or whatever. If you are sworn to protect and defend the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, you are our friend. But if you propose to try and throw down those documents which are precious to us, then most assuredly you are our enemy for life. An old gentleman I knew many years ago, and he's passed on now, fought well, you might call it the Arab-Israeli War of 47, through that period. And years ago, before I knew anything about this, he made an interesting point. He said, Mark, and people know I use this quote quite a bit, they eat their young. I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, let me put it this way. Everybody in this room, for instance, is usable to the New World Order crowd, and when they're done, they will spit them out too. They will chew them up, and they will use whatever they can, and then drop them into the ash pile. The only reason that the issues that you've seen brought up in the last 6 months became issues is not because of the couch potato who watches Roseanne, big-time wrestling, and is busy with television and baseball. Those aren't the people they were worried about. Turn around and look at all the people in this room. These are the ones that they were worried about and why the contract with America came about. I'm going to challenge you to this because I watched Comrade Koppel, we call him Howdy Doody in our part of the country. He asked a question that you should have all paid attention to during that public forum that took place in Decker, Michigan. It was a question about social engineering and the formula that hasn't worked. He said, well, didn't you just have a revolution? And didn't you guys just vote the buggers out? No, we didn't, and a lot of people started to realize that. And will you notice that as quickly as any crisis developed, this contract, all of the parts that were supposed to be in motion have been thrown to the wind? Whatever excuse could be found to try and move away from and to try and buy time for the New World Order to entrench. And this has to do with the issue of people arguing back and forth about Christianity and this nation being founded as a Christian nation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is because of our Christian philosophy that we have had the open-heartedness to offer this nation to so many other people, despite what everybody tries to be brain-screwed with. The fact of the matter is that were this any other nation, you would not see the end result that we have here with regard to the form of government and the type of people that we are. To ask a Christian not to say in the name of Jesus Christ is like asking a Muslim not to pray to Mecca, and like asking a gentleman of the Jewish faith to take off his yarmulke because you think it insults you. Would you do that to another person of another faith? Well, much in the same way, you do not apologize for your Christianity, and you should never do that. When the time comes with the militia, hopefully it will not be needed, but if need be, we are there. I am not an individual leader of a command per se, but when the time comes, this suit will disappear, and whatever clothes are necessary, I will don, and I will commit myself. And if we do not return from this, then so be it. And in fact, as was sung in a song here, ladies and gentlemen, I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees as a slave. And eventually, ladies and gentlemen, they're going to decide that all of you are not politically correct or not right too. Whether you, again, be holding a notepad, a microphone, or just be one of us common citizens out there. At some point in time, you may not quite do the right thing, or you're going to be in the wrong place at the right time. Well, who will come to your aid after you've thrown everybody else from the sleigh? The militia is there for a purpose and for a reason. Not to stand in front of, nor to stand behind, but to stand side by side with the American people as one of the liberty teeth that we have always possessed. And our first, and if you don't have it, you better have it, is a copy of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And your second is the coercive force in hand capable of defending yourself, your home, your community, and your nation when the time comes. A lot of the fellow patriots that have been here tonight have been worried and afraid and concerned about what's going on, and they've offered other solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to get up off your hind end and get behind them. But you also need to become a militiaman now, for you have no more time. That means that you have to understand the concept of the camaraderie of brothers and sisters in arms. We have been entrenched for quite a while doing what we're doing, facing the New World Order crowd with no resources, with no media per se, and the only media we have are you. Word of mouth, person to person. Well, now you need to stand up. Get behind these efforts, but also with an equal eye towards the possibility of having to defend yourself. Notice I haven't backed down on that, and I refuse to, because I am very concerned for all of your children, for your families when the time comes. You are going to be the best defense of the nation. A Marine Corps general asked me, as I pointed out earlier here to you also, he asked me after about 7 hours of sitting down with him, he said, Mark, my forces can fight the New World Order, they can beat the New World Order, but their biggest concern is, will the American people stand shoulder to shoulder with us to defend the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, because that's what he was sworn to. And I said, that's your decision. What is it? A long time ago, a man said, I regret that I have but one life to give for my country. Well, I guess that's the exact attitude I'll take right now. I regret that I have but one because I wish I could give you 10 more. We need help in that area too, ladies and gentlemen, and that's why you need to get out and you need to speak, because we can't be everywhere, and eventually I think we will be silenced. It's only a matter of time, and death comes to all of us. But if that's the case, and if that seems to be your fear, I will remind you that it does come to all of us eventually. How we meet life in the meantime, and whether or not we truly are free, both here and here and here, is decided by each one of us. If there's one thing that we can do now, ladies and gentlemen, it is going to be, perhaps first, as a friend of mine said, to act as if everything depended upon us, and to pray because it all depends upon God. The New World Order crowd is behind in their timeline. The reason all the stops were pulled out with all of the media and everything else is because this is the most crucial time in American history, going all the way back to the American Revolution. You are living history right now. The biggest problem, and I'll remind you again what Ted Koppel asked, and it was one of the questions he wanted to get out there right away, is, well, what went wrong? Why is it the contract of America didn't put you all back in your seats and put you back to sleep? He was asking a social engineering question to a population group that was typical of many parts of the country. And what they were trying to find out is why the scam didn't work.
If you wish to find a peaceful solution, then don't sit on your hind end much longer. If you must, in fact, in one form or another, decide to express yourself with pen, the time to do it is now. If you're going to call somebody, you better get on the phone now. Don't wait 2 days, because I know it'll happen when you walk away from here. Well, you know, Mark said, and yeah, I remember it was a week ago, and I don't think it's that important now. Now is the time. Our 10-year goal for America is very straightforward. Do you wish to be free 10 years from now or a slave? Free. 50 years from now, handing this nation over to your children, where do you want this nation to be, free or a slave? Free. 100 years from now, this nation will stand, not may stand, will stand upon your strength. And where do you wish this nation to be? Free. Then I imagine that's what will happen, provided you stick to your words. One thing about Americans is this: we are kind of lackadaisical. In fact, I like to call it being hobbitized. But we might also remember that at least one or two other nations in the past have risen up and tried to face us, thinking that we were the hobbits of the planet, and instead found out we were the teddy bears with teeth, as you all know. That mistake has been made again, and we won't make it in our lifetime. And ladies and gentlemen, if you were in the Great War, World War II, or if you were in Vietnam, or if you were in Korea, your nation's going to call on you again. And I know the words that are going through your mind. I've already done this once. I've spent my time. I deserve a rest. Ladies and gentlemen, with freedom there is no rest. Well, I'll tell you what. How many of you here know how we close our meetings? Well, I'll tell you what. I'll ask you to join with me, because all of you together, and I'll give you a little hint, and I'll say it quietly. God bless the Republic, death to the New World Order, we shall prevail. Now I'll ask you together to join me. God bless the Republic! Death to the New World Order! We shall prevail. Thank you.
You know, you need to get in touch. You need to get in touch with your God. You need to get in touch with your fellow Americans. You need to get down to the militia. You need to quit screwing around, sitting on the couch, watching a ball game and the life going by and nothing's getting done. You understand? You need to get out there and hit a couple of these patriotic meetings and listen to some of these folks talking that are trying to save you and your country.
The American dream has become a nightmare. Signs of the time are on cardboard on corners in town. There's a cancer called crime in our cities, and an unspoken fear. We're on our way down. We must take America back, put an end to the gangs and the drugs in the streets, and the fact that the bad guys most always go free, that is wrong. We need leaders who lead us, not stick us and bleed us, and take all our money and send it abroad. We must take America back. We need prayer in the schools and more things made in USA. It's the least we can do for the red, white, and blue. We must take America back. It's a hell here on earth in some city schoolyard. When bullets and birth control outnumber books, something's wrong. There's a hunger for good news and heroes, but good news is no news, so all of the heroes are gone. We must take